Chapter 1133. Yiglao and the old man from the main pagoda pounced towards Qin Feiyang almost at the same time as Mu Qing's words. At this moment, Qin Feiyang stood in front of the enchantment, only a few meters away from Mu Qing and the other two. For Yiglao and the other two fake gods, such a close distance, wouldn't it be easy to capture them? Yiglao and Mu Qing had full confidence that as long as Qin Feiyang didn't enter the ancient castle, they would definitely not be able to escape today. However, Mu Qing felt a sense of unease in her heart, because Qin Feiyang's current behavior was too strange. Facing two fake gods, not only was he not nervous at all, he even crossed his arms in front of his chest with a playful expression. What exactly is wrong? Mu Qing muttered to himself and suddenly looked down at Dragon Island. Qin Feiyang was so calm. There must be a reason. Could it be that there was an ambush below? But no. At such a close distance, even if there was an ambush on the island, it would be too late to rescue Qin Feiyang. All of this was said to be slow, but the whole process only happened in an instant. Little bastard, let's see how you can run. Yiglao and Mu Qing had already rushed to the front of Qin Feiyang and the miss of Longfeng House, within reach. They laughed. Now even if Qin Feiyang wanted to enter the ancient castle, it was already too late. However, just when the two of them thought that they would definitely be able to catch Qin Feiyang, they suddenly bumped into the void and fell down like a dog eating feces, looking extremely embarrassed. The purple gold light screen appeared, and Mu Qing looked at the purple gold light screen in surprise. What was this thing? It could actually block two fake gods? Yiglao and Mu Qing got up. Their faces were also full of disbelief. Suddenly, the two of them seemed to have realized something as they lowered their heads and scanned the Dragon Island below. It was fine if they didn't look, but when they looked, their old faces suddenly became gloomy. What's wrong? Mu Qing looked at the two of them in surprise. Yiglao said, I didn't notice it earlier, but now I realize that this is actually the Dragon Island, and that purplish golden radiance is the sealing enchantment that seals the inner sea. What? Mu Qing was stunned. Didn't that mean that Qin Feiyang and the young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had already escaped from the inland sea and entered the endless sea? Brilliant, brilliant. At this moment, Qin Feiyang clapped his hands and smiled brightly. How did you get out? Mu Qing suddenly raised his head and stared at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang joked, this must be a secret. How can I tell you a secret? Impossible. Even we can't break the seal of the inner sea, let alone you. Yiglao and the old man from the main pagoda also looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. Qin Feiyang said, then I want to ask you, who set up this enchantment? Your ancestor, the Qin Emperor. The old man from the main pagoda blurted out. But after he said that, he was stunned. That's right. This sealing enchantment was set up by the Qin Emperor. As the descendant of the Qin Emperor, it was not impossible for Qin Feiyang to break this enchantment. But how did he do it? That's right, I am the descendant of the Qin Emperor. Can his sealing enchantment trap me? Qin Feiyang smiled proudly and looked at Mu Qing. It's obviously right in front of you and within reach, but you can only look at it. How is it? Is it fun? Are you deliberately playing with me? Mu Qing clenched his hands. Yes, I am deliberately playing with you. You've been chasing me for so many days. If I don't get back some face, how can I establish myself in the future? Qin Feiyang laughed. Mu Qing said, whether it's the Great Qin Empire or the Forgotten Continent, there's no place for you now. That's not necessarily true. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, based on your cautious personality, after receiving my message, you should have used the all-seeing eye to predict my location, right? So what? Mu Qing said in a deep voice. Then I can rest assured. You're in the internal sea, so you can't accurately predict my location. And now, the space-time gate in your hand will only open tomorrow morning. In other words, I have one day to arrange my affairs. And one day is completely enough. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Mu Qing was about to go crazy. He did not expect that all of this was part of Qin Feiyang's plan. This made him doubt his own ability again. Could it be that he really could not compare to this person? Suddenly, Yiglao sneered and said, don't forget, we still have the Real space-time gate. Then you'd better do it as soon as possible. Otherwise, when we leave, it will be difficult to find us again. Qin Feiyang joked. Don't be too happy too early. Oldie enunciated each and every word as his eyes were filled with rage. Qin Feiyang shrugged, looked at Mu Qing and said, Actually, I've already seen through it. You've always wanted to compete with me, but obviously, I've won. Mu Qing was silent, only staring at Qin Feiyang. But don't worry, we'll definitely meet again. At that time, remember to work hard. Don't lose to me again, that would be embarrassing. Qin Feiyang laughed and ignored Mu Qing and the other two. He turned to look at the young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and asked suspiciously, Why isn't your mother here yet? I don't know either. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion shook her head and then said worriedly, Did something happen again? Qin Feiyang could not help but frown. Time passed breath by breath. Mu Qing and the other two did not leave, because returning from Dragon Island to God's Island, even with Yiglao and the other two false gods, would take 2 to 3 days. As for the space-time gate, it would open tomorrow morning, so there was no need to do so. About 100 breaths passed. Whoosh! The mysterious lady and the middle-aged man finally appeared. Why did you take so long? I thought something happened to you again. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was immediately dissatisfied. How can there be so many accidents in the world? We just went to the Divine City to inquire about your teacher's situation. The mysterious lady transmitted her voice. How is teacher? The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion asked. The mysterious lady patted her shoulder and said, Don't worry, his life is not in danger for the time being. Then she looked at Yiglao and the other two and asked in confusion, What's going on with them? The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion glanced at Qin Feiyang and pursed her lips. It's all because of this wicked guy. He deliberately called them over and teased them. Teased. The mysterious lady was stunned and asked curiously, How did he tease them? The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion briefly explained. After hearing this, the mysterious lady was speechless. She turned to look at Qin Feiyang and shook her head. Brat, you're really wicked. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. The mysterious lady shook her head and smiled. She glanced at Mu Qing and the other two, then turned to look at a teleportation gate. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said, All right, let's go. Who exactly are you? Yiglao asked. Who am I? The mysterious lady's eyes flashed coldly. Don't worry, you'll know who I am soon. With that, she stepped into the teleportation gate. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and the middle-aged man also walked in one after another. Qin Feiyang, next time, I definitely won't lose to you again. I'll bet everything I have. Mu Qing suddenly spoke, staring at Qin Feiyang's back, her eyes flashing with madness. I'll be waiting. Qin Feiyang stopped and said without looking back. Then he entered the teleportation gate. The endless sea was vast and boundless. There were countless emperor beasts and saint beasts. And in the central sea area of the endless sea, there were more than 10 islands of various sizes. The largest island was thousands of miles long, like a continent floating on the sea. And on one of the islands, there were villages everywhere. It was hard to estimate how many there were, but there were no exceptions. Outside every village, there was a stone tablet with a giant golden tiger engraved on it. At this time it was late at night. All the villages were closed, looking extremely deserted. At the same time, 2 men and 2 women stood side by side in the sky above the island, scanning the villages below. It was Qin Feiyang's group of 4. The mysterious lady smiled faintly. All the tribesmen of the Sky Tiger tribe are here. You can check. Are you sure they're all here? Qin Feiyang frowned. There were more than 1 million people in the Sky Tiger tribe. He couldn't check them all. Kid, am I so unworthy of your trust? The mysterious lady glared at him angrily. What do you think? Qin Feiyang glanced at her indifferently. With a wave of his hand, Yanwei appeared out of thin air. Qin Feiyang smiled. Go. Okay. Yanwei nodded, unable to hide the joy on his face. He scanned the villages on the island, turned into a stream of light, and flew down. In a short while, the island became lively. Lights were brightly lit and noises could be heard from all directions. Where are the divine crystals? The mysterious lady retracted her gaze and asked Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said, "Don't worry. I'll give them to you after I leave with them." Leave with them? Are you kidding? You can't even protect yourself now. How are you going to protect them? Furthermore, the Sky Tiger tribe doesn't only have a few dozen or a few hundred people. There are more than 1,000,000 people. How are you going to settle them? The mysterious lady, the middle-aged man, and the young mistress of the Dragon Phoenix house were all shocked by Qin Feiyang's words. I know that too. But I can't be at ease leaving them here with you. Qin Feiyang frowned. The mysterious lady said, Are you worried that I'll use them to threaten you one day? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded without hiding anything. The mysterious lady smiled helplessly and sighed. Actually, I'm not as bad as you think. Is that so? Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at her suspiciously. Yes. There are some things that I can't tell you yet. But I can swear that I have no ill intentions towards you now. Furthermore, I won't threaten you to do anything anymore. The mysterious lady spoke very seriously and her attitude was very sincere. There was no trace of faking it. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Why do I feel like I've heard a joke? Brat, do you believe that I'll kill you? The mysterious lady's face darkened. Why was this little guy so stubborn? Anyway, you've harmed me a lot. This time won't make a difference. Qin Feiyang pursed his lips and said indifferently, It's actually very simple if you want me to believe you. Give me a reason to believe you. My head is about to explode. Chapter 1134. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix house looked at the irritated and mysterious lady, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, You don't believe in mother, but you should at least believe in me, right? After all, we can be considered friends in need. Qin Feiyang frowned. I guarantee with my personality that what you think will never happen again. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix house said again. Qin Feiyang glanced at the mother and daughter in front of him, his expression uncertain. Finally, he sighed deeply and looked at the two of them. Wait a moment. After he finished speaking, he entered the castle and walked towards the iron box. Fatso frowned. Boss, we risked our lives to snatch this. Are we really going to give it to them? Hey, Fatso, don't be mistaken. The divine crystal was snatched by this emperor and Qin Feiyang. What does it have to do with you? The spirit snake emperor said unhappily. Fatso said angrily. What do you mean by that? Although Fat Lord did not contribute, Fat Lord is also risking his life with you. Is they? The spirit snake emperor laughed disdainfully, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said, Although Fatso is very shameless, this emperor agrees with him. If we give the divine crystal to them like this, we will be at a loss. Then what do you mean? Qin Feiyang looked at it suspiciously. Last time, we agreed that if we snatched the divine crystal, you would agree to this emperor's request. Now, it's time for you to fulfill your promise. This emperor wants the divine arts. Of course, this emperor also knows that you don't have any extra divine arts, but now is your chance. The spirit snake emperor laughed sinisterly. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. This guy's appetite was not small, to actually keep thinking about the divine arts. I understand. After looking deeply at the spirit snake emperor, Qin Feiyang stepped forward to open the iron box, took out the divine crystal, and appeared outside again. Looking at the divinity crystal in Qin Feiyang's hand, the mysterious lady's eyes lit up with desire. Qin Feiyang was even more surprised and asked, Can you tell me what this thing is for? The mysterious madam rolled her eyes and said, Don't give me that. If I tell you, you definitely won't give it to me. Qin Feiyang was extremely helpless. He lowered his head and looked at the eye crystal suspiciously, then casually threw it to the mysterious madam. The mysterious madam was startled. She quickly caught the divine crystal and glared at Qin Feiyang. She said angrily, This is a treasure, be careful. How precious. Qin Feiyang was curious. Don't try to trick me. The mysterious lady snorted and lowered her head to size up the divine crystal. Her eyes shone brightly. Qin Feiyang glanced at her, then lowered his head and fell into deep thought. The miss of the Dragon Phoenix house walked to his side and asked in a low voice, Are you thinking about where to go in the future? Yeah. I definitely can't stay in the Forgotten Continent, and I can't go back to the Great Qin Empire. Where should I go? The world is so big, is there no place for me, Qin Feiyang? Qin Feiyang sighed. Now you really can't stay in the Forgotten Continent, because the main tower and the Mu family will definitely not let this matter go. And although we want to protect you, facing the alliance of the main tower and the Mu family, we are powerless. The Miss of the Dragon Phoenix House said. The mysterious madam put away the divine crystal and looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, I think you should return to the Great Qin Empire. Why? Qin Feiyang turned to look at her and asked suspiciously. Because as long as you return to the Great Qin Empire, even if Mu Qin can predict your location, he won't dare to bring people to cause trouble. Moreover, it has been more than half a year since you last went back. Don't you want to go back and see your mother? The mysterious madam said. Yes. But you also know that the emperor's decree only said that within 10 years, my mother and anyone related to me will not be harmed. It didn't say that they won't kill me. If I go back now, I will definitely be killed by them, Qin Feiyang said. That's right. Let's not talk about the emperor, just the imperial tutor will definitely not allow you to continue growing. But I believe that with your intelligence, you definitely have the ability to deal with it. The mysterious madam smiled. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. The mysterious madam said, Of course, this is only my personal suggestion. As for what to do, it is still up to you to decide. Think about it carefully. Qin Feiyang gritted his teeth and said, No need to think about it. I will return to the Great Qin Empire immediately. I knew you would make this choice. The mysterious madam smiled. Knowing that there are tigers in the mountain, but still heading towards it. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Qin Feiyang's way of doing things was a bit stupid, but she praised it. Because no matter what difficulties one encountered, one couldn't blindly run away. Only by bravely facing them could one become braver. What about you guys? Aren't you afraid that the Great Tower and the Mu Jia will come to trouble you? Qin Feiyang looked at the three and asked. We are all fake gods. What is there to be afraid of? What's more, now that we have the divine crystal in hand, even if they find us here, they can't do anything to us. The mysterious madam sneered. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a strange light. The mysterious madam's words were not difficult to understand. With the divine crystal in hand, the world is mine. It turned out that the importance of the divine crystal was beyond his imagination. Looking at Qin Feiyang's eyes, the mysterious madam raised her eyebrows and said, Boy, I advise you not to have any bad ideas. Qin Feiyang pursed his lips and said, Now that I have given you the divine crystal, shouldn't you give me some reward? You can't let me work for nothing, right? Doesn't the concealment art count? And those perfect battle techniques I gave you before, were they all blown by the wind? So young man, don't be too greedy. The mysterious madam said meaningfully. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Although I don't know what the divine crystal is used for, I can imagine that even if all the perfect battle techniques are combined, they can't be compared to the divine crystal. Qin Feiyang sneered. The mysterious madam was a little angry, but she suddenly thought of something and looked at Qin Feiyang proudly and said, Now that the divine crystal is in my hands, what can you do to me if I don't give you any reward? What can I do to you? At most, I will just curse you behind your back, saying things like burning the bridge after crossing the river, shameless things like that. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. How dare you? The mysterious madam's veins were bulging. Qin Feiyang said. What's there to be afraid of? I used to curse you behind your back a lot. Little bastard, aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning? The mysterious madam said angrily. Who are you to me? Will I be struck by lightning if I curse you? You think too much. Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. The mysterious madam was so angry that her body was trembling, and her eyes were filled with anger. Seeing this scene, the young lady and the middle-aged man hid at the side and snickered, their eyes meaningful. What about me? Qin Feiyang looked at the mysterious madam playfully. After this period of time, he did not find any malicious intent on the mysterious madam's face, so his mentality was relaxed. What about it? Humph. Sooner or later you will understand how laughable your current actions are. The mysterious madam snorted and said, "Don't say that I am unreasonable. I will satisfy you once more. Tell me, what do you want this time?" "Divine art," Qin Feiyang blurted out without hesitation. "Are you deliberately looking for a beating?" "No." The mysterious madam was so angry that her teeth itched. The moment he opened his mouth, he was talking about the deity technique. Did he think that the deity technique was something that could be found on the market? Qin Feiyang said with a sneaky smile, "Stop pretending. Your daughter said that you have other divine arts." And the mysterious madam turned her head and glared at the young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion panicked and glared at Qin Feiyang angrily. She looked at the mysterious madam and smiled embarrassedly. "Mother, I was just saying it casually." "You can't even say it casually," the mysterious madam shouted, and then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "I don't have any divine art, but I can give you some more perfect battle arts." "Stingy." Qin Feiyang muttered. "Then do you want it or not?" the mysterious madam said angrily. "Yes, definitely. It's a waste if you don't want it." Qin Feiyang hurriedly nodded and brought Lu Hong and the others, as well as Wolf King and the other beasts, out of the castle. After coming out, everyone stared at the mysterious madam with burning eyes, like a group of bandits. "What are you doing?" Seeing this, the mysterious madam was extremely vigilant. She felt that in the eyes of these guys, she was like a delicious cake. "Didn't you say? Give us some perfect battle arts?" And this time, everyone has contributed to snatching the divine crystal. So naturally, everyone has to have a share. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "You." The mysterious madam gnashed her teeth. "Why was this brat such a bastard?" The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion said, "Mother, just satisfy him, or else he might really scold you behind your back." "Zuh." The mysterious madam sighed helplessly, swept her gaze towards Lu Hong and the others, as well as Wolf King and the other beasts, and said, "To be honest, I really have to thank you all. Thank you all for silently following Qin Feiyang all these years, helping him and taking care of him. It was your support that allowed him to reach where he is today." "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Lu Hong and the others also looked at each other. Why did these words sound so strange? They followed Qin Feiyang, helped Qin Feiyang, and took care of Qin Feiyang. What did it have to do with this woman? On what basis did she say that she had to thank them on behalf of Qin Feiyang? The mysterious madam did not explain and continued, "I will not treat you all unfairly. Right now, I will give each of you a perfect killing battle art and a perfect support battle art. Of course, I will not give any more to those who already have a perfect battle art." Then wouldn't brother be at a disadvantage? Wolf King was dissatisfied, because it already had the Fury of the Mad God and the Void Escape Steps, both of which were perfect battle arts. "I gave you the Fury of the Mad God and the Void Escape Steps, so be content." The mysterious madam rolled her eyes at Wolf King, looked at Lu Hong and the others and said, "What do you lack, tell me?" "I lack a perfect support battle art." Fatso was the first to step forward. "Me too." Lu Hong nodded. "And this emperor?" The double-winged snow eagle also hurriedly said. Whether it was the double-winged snow eagle, Fatso, or Lu Hong, their perfect killing battle arts were all given to them by the mysterious madam. The black dragon snake, phantom snake emperor, and pangolin also hurriedly ran to the mysterious madam. "It seems that we don't have a chance." Viper looked at Dan Wangkai and said with a wry smile. Dan Wangkai also had a regretful look on his face. As one of the 10 heroes of the Azure Sea, they even had forbidden arts. Naturally, they did not lack perfect battle arts, but after all, it was better to have more skills. Chapter 1135. A moment later, Fatty, Lu Hong, the two-winged snow eagle, and the other beasts all got the perfect battle art they wanted. Qin Feiyang also sent everyone to the castle. "I can see that none of the people and beasts around you are good people." The mysterious lady rolled her eyes at Qin Feiyang. "This is cute, isn't it?" Qin Feiyang smiled, then stretched out his hand in front of the mysterious lady and said, "What about me and Yen Wei? You still want it?" The mysterious lady was stunned. "Of course. I snatched the divine crystal from the chief pagoda master. You can't erase my credit. Qin Feiyang said. I really don't understand. The Qin emperor is such an upright person. How can he have such a shameless descendant? If I didn't give you the concealment art, would you be able to snatch it? You still want credit? Aren't you ashamed? The mysterious lady was extremely annoyed. Qin Feiyang said, but you can't deny that I snatched the divine crystal from the chief pagoda master. Okay. Don't say anything. I'm afraid of you. I'll give it to you. What does Yanwei lack? The mysterious lady said. She was afraid that if she continued, she would lose her temper. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and said, I gave him the Sky Demon 9 steps you gave me last time. He still lacks a perfect battle art. The mysterious lady took out 2 jade slips from her Qianquan bag and threw them to Qin Feiyang. She snorted and said, Now don't scold me behind my back. Of course not. You're such a good person. If I still scold you, wouldn't I be a heartless person? Qin Feiyang grabbed the 2 jade slips and grinned. The mysterious lady rolled her eyes. Qin Feiyang chuckled mischievously and lowered his head to check the 2 jade slips. The 2 battle arts were Tiger Taming Art and Dragon Rising Art. Tiger Taming Art had a total of 4 moves. The first 3 moves all had the lethality of a perfect battle art. The power of the 4th move was even stronger than the previous 3 moves. It had already reached the peak of a perfect battle art. Qin Feiyang was somewhat surprised. He did not expect that the mysterious madam would actually give him such a powerful killing battle art. But when he carefully looked at the soaring dragon art, his eyes suddenly lit up. The Dragon Rise incantation was even more powerful than the Tiger Taming incantation. However, what made it powerful was not the lethality of the soaring dragon art, but the fact that it could raise the user's cultivation by a small realm. Moreover, it could be stacked. For example, he was now a 4-star battle saint. When he displayed the perfect battle art, he could display the battle prowess of an 8-star battle saint. However, if he activated the soaring dragon art, he could display the battle prowess of a 9-star battle saint. If it was combined with the kill character art, it would be even more terrifying. The kill character art could be superimposed by one major realm. In addition to the soaring dragon art's minor realm, when Qin Feiyang activated the kill character art, he would be able to become a 5-star combat emperor. With the cultivation of a 5-star combat emperor and all his trump cards, he could even fight against a 9-star combat emperor. Thank you. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and raised his head to look at the mysterious madam gratefully. Now, his greatest weakness was that his cultivation was weak. The mysterious madam gave him this soaring dragon art. It was undoubtedly a timely help, allowing his battle prowess to soar. The mysterious madam smiled faintly and said, It's getting late. Let's hurry up and leave. Qin Feiyang nodded, then lowered his head to look at the island below and shouted, Yanwei! Whoosh! Not long later, Yanwei soared into the sky and landed in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Do you want to stay here or follow me to the great Qin Empire? Yanwei was stunned and asked, What about my clansmen? Qin Feiyang said, They will stay here. Is it okay to stay here? Yanwei was shocked and glanced at the mysterious madam and the other 2. Qin Feiyang said, Then do you have a better place to settle them? Yanwei shook his head. The main tower and the Mu family would definitely not let him go. If his clansmen returned to the 9 regions, they would definitely be threatened by the main tower and the Mu family. Other than the 9 regions, there was only the Central Divine Kingdom in the Forgotten Continent. It was even more impossible for his clansmen to go to the Central Divine Kingdom. After thinking about it, it seemed that letting his clansmen stay here was indeed the best choice. Wait, wasn't there still the Great Qin Empire? Yanwei looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Can you let my clansmen move to the Great Qin Empire? No. After being with me for so long, don't you know my situation? My situation in the Great Qin Empire is worse than here. Moreover, even if we can find a place for your clansmen to stay in the Great Qin Empire, we won't be able to move them over in a short period of time, Qin Feiyang said. Yanwei frowned and walked to Qin Feiyang and said in a low voice, But I can't let them stay here. Qin Feiyang secretly laughed. Even I believe them. You should also believe them. Okay. Yan Wei nodded helplessly. Qin Feiyang said. Then think about it carefully. Do you want to stay here? I won't force you. I respect your choice. What's there to think about? Wherever you go, I'll go. Yan Wei didn't hesitate in the slightest. Qin Feiyang patted his shoulder. He didn't need to say anything. Then he turned to the mysterious madam and the middle-aged man and cupped his hands. Then I'll have to trouble the two seniors to take care of them. The mysterious madam said, after being together for so many years, this is the first time you've sincerely called me a senior. It's rare. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly and turned to look at the young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. See you again. Take care of yourself too. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion reminded. Qin Feiyang nodded and opened a teleportation gate. In the endless sea, one could open a teleportation gate that led directly to the 9 regions. Let's go. Qin Feiyang said to Yan Wei, and stepped into the teleportation gate without looking back. Yan Wei lowered his head and glanced at his clansmen on the island before resolutely turning around and following in. Soon, the teleportation gate disappeared from everyone's sight. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion retracted her gaze and looked at the mysterious madam. She asked in confusion, Mother, why didn't you leave him behind? Now that we have the divine crystals, we have the ability to protect him. You haven't been with him for long, so you don't understand him. He has a fierce spirit that refuses to admit defeat. He definitely won't hide in one place just because some strong enemies have appeared. Furthermore, I don't want him to stay here either, because this won't do him any good. Instead, it will restrict his growth. The outside world is his stage. The mysterious madam laughed. The young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion nodded and said with a smile, Back then you tried every possible means to kill him, but now, you're thinking for him everywhere. It really is as the old saying goes, the world is unpredictable. That's right. Back then, who would have thought that this little fellow was his descendant? The mysterious madam raised her head and looked at the pitch-black night sky. It was unknown what past events she had recalled, but her expression was extremely melancholic. The first area. Above a glacier. Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei appeared out of thin air. Yan Wei looked around and asked suspiciously, Where is this? Look below. Qin Feiyang scanned the area below. Yan Wei looked down and a lake entered his line of sight. The lake wasn't very big, and there was a thick layer of ice on the surface of the lake. White mist rose, and the cold air was oppressive. Qin Feiyang said, Right now we are in the first area, and the teleportation altar that leads to the Great Qin Empire is under this ice lake. Yan Wei's eyes suddenly revealed a strange light. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and turned to look at Qin Feiyang, asking, Wasn't the Heavenly Spiral Tribe also sent here? Why don't we go look for them? Qin Feiyang was stunned, shook his head and smiled. If you didn't remind me, I would have really forgotten about them. Schwa. Finished. With a wave of his hand, Fatso appeared and said, The fate of the Heavenly Spiral Tribe is completely up to you. Do as you see fit. Back then, the leader of the Heavenly Spiral Tribe almost killed you. We definitely can't let it go just like that. Fatso's eyes flashed with killing intent. I understand. Yan Wei, accompany him. Remember, you must be careful. Qin Feiyang reminded. Although Mu Qing was trapped in the inland sea and could only come out in the early hours of the morning, he could still predict his approximate location. The most important thing was that the white-robed old man didn't enter the inland sea. This was what worried him. When Mu Qing predicted his approximate location, he would definitely let the white-robed old man chase after him. Although the white-robed old man was in the central divine kingdom and couldn't directly open the portal to the first area, don't forget that the Mu family still had a real space-time portal. So, he couldn't let his guard down now. Fatso naturally thought of this and nodded to Qin Feiyang, turned around and flew away with Yan Wei. Boom. But at this moment, a terrifying aura descended above the three of them. Qin Feiyang was startled and quickly raised his head to look. Fatso and Qin Feiyang also hurriedly braked and stopped in the void, looking up at the sky. Immediately, the three of them changed color. They saw an old man appear out of thin air in the sky. He had white hair and wore a long robe. His aura was unfathomable. Who else could it be but the white-robed old man? How did he catch up so quickly? He even knows our exact location. Could it be that Mu Qing has already left the inland sea? Fatso and Yin Wei were bewildered. No. Mu Qing must have predicted our approximate location and sensed our purpose. Therefore he asked him to come here directly to intercept us. This bastard. I really don't dare to be careless for a moment. Let's go. Qin Feiyang's eyes darkened. He turned into a stream of light and plunged into the ice lake below. Fatso and Qin Feiyang didn't dare to hesitate and immediately dived into the ice lake. Sure enough, he's here. The white-robed old man smiled coldly. Terrifying divine power poured down and pounced on Qin Feiyang and the other two. Boom. The entire ice lake instantly exploded. It's over. Feeling the surging divine power, Yin Wei and Fatso's hearts sank. If they were imprisoned by this divine power, they wouldn't be able to break out even if they opened the door of potential. However, Qin Feiyang was very calm. He stared at the bottom of the lake, his eyes flickering. Suddenly, with a wave of his hand, he grabbed Fatso and Qin Feiyang and instantly disappeared without a trace. Inside the ancient castle. What are we doing in the ancient castle? If we're trapped here, won't we be doomed? Yin Wei looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Fatso was also suspicious. However, as if he suddenly thought of something, his eyes flashed. He looked at Yin Wei and smiled. Don't worry, let's wait for a good show. Qin Feiyang was also full of smiles. A good show? Chapter 1136. At the same time, outside the ice lake, after Qin Feiyang and the other two entered the castle, the white-robed old man's divine might went straight to the bottom of the lake. Who dares to disturb my meditation? Immediately, a pleasant voice sounded from the bottom of the lake, but it was filled with a bone-piercing chill. Following closely, a mighty divine might rushed out from the bottom of the lake, like a torrent of beasts, rolling up monstrous waves and pouncing towards the white-robed old man standing in the air. The white-robed old man was surprised. Not good. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his face suddenly changed. Without any hesitation, he retreated like lightning. However, the speed of the divine might was even more terrifying, instantly imprisoning him in the air. Dong. At the same time, a huge snow python rushed out from the ice lake and floated in front of the white-robed old man. Its eyes seemed to be condensed from ice, emitting a great pressure. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. When the white-robed old man saw the snow python, his body and mind trembled, and he quickly apologized. If you didn't mean it, then you did it on purpose. The snow python looked at him playfully. I didn't mean it. The white-robed old man shook his head, his eyes filled with fear. Since you didn't do it on purpose, did you come here to court death? If that's the case, then I'll fulfill your wish. The snow python's eyes turned cold, raised its huge tail, and slapped the white-robed old man's body. Ah! The white-robed old man screamed, his body cracked on the spot, and blood stained the sky. Like a meteorite, he smashed into the glacier below. The snow python's strength was too strong. In front of her, even the white-robed old man who was only one step away from becoming a war god had no power to fight back. At the same time, on the surface of the ice lake, two heads popped out. It was Qin Feiyang and Yin Wei. Who is she? How can she be so strong? Yin Wei secretly asked. Looking at the snow python above, his eyes were filled with fear. Qin Feiyang said, she is the guardian of the teleportation altar. According to my guess, she should be a real god. A real god? Yin Wei's eyes trembled. No wonder Qin Feiyang and Fatso said that there would be a good show to watch. What was the difference between a fake god meeting a real god and seeking death? Don't bother about them, let's go. Qin Feiyang called out and rushed to the bottom of the lake. This was not the first time he had come here, so he easily found the entrance and entered the cave below the ice lake. I didn't expect there to be such a place in the first district. Looking at the grotto and the teleportation altar, Yin Wei's face was filled with hope. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and pointed his index finger in the air. Battle chi surged out and gushed towards the teleportation altar. Wang. Very soon. The teleportation altar was activated. Whoosh. But at the same time, the snow python transformed into a meter long and appeared in the cave. Greetings, senior. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank, and he hurriedly bowed. Yan Wei was also respectful. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. The snow python glanced at Yan Wei, then looked at Qin Feiyang and jokingly said, "Do you think that you can slip away from under my nose?" Qin Feiyang looked a little embarrassed. Suddenly, the snow python glanced at Yan Wei and said to Qin Feiyang, "You can go, but he can't." "Why?" Qin Feiyang wondered. The snow python said, "Because he's not from the Great Qin Empire, he can't set foot in that place. There's such a rule." "What about the Mu family? They also went to the Great Qin Empire a lot. Why don't you care?" Qin Feiyang frowned. The snow python said, "That's because I didn't see it. If I saw it, I wouldn't allow them to go to the Great Qin Empire." "You didn't see it?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and immediately smiled. "That's easy." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent Yan Wei to the castle, then said, "Senior, you can't see it like this." The veins on the snow python's forehead jumped. "Does this kid think I'm a monkey?" Just when she was about to go crazy, Qin Feiyang spoke first. "Senior, there's a problem that has puzzled this junior for a long time." "What's the problem?" the snow python asked. Qin Feiyang suspiciously asked, "Why do the state preceptor and the Black Iron Army have a time limit to enter the Forgotten Continent, but I don't? What do you think?" the snow python asked. Qin Feiyang said, "This junior has seriously thought about this problem. This junior thinks that senior should be protecting this junior." "Protecting you?" The snow python was stunned and sneered. "Boy, you're too self-righteous." Qin Feiyang frowned. "Then senior, why don't you tell me why?" "Because of your ancestor. Only your family's ancestor has that much face, not you. Do you understand?" the snow python said. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. "It's actually because of his ancestor again. The forefathers plant trees, the descendants enjoy the shade. This sentence is really not wrong. Because of his ancestor, Gongsun Bei let him go. Because of his ancestor, he and the young lady of the Dragon Phoenix house escaped from the hands of the Chief Tower. Because of his ancestor, they escaped from the inland sea. Also, because of the ancestor, the snow python turned a blind eye to it. Although he has never seen his ancestor, he doesn't know how much kindness he has received from his ancestor over the years. It's hard to repay." Suddenly, Qin Feiyang remembered the old man in the white robe and asked, "Senior, where's the old man of the Mu family?" "He's kneeling outside," the snow python said lightly. Qin Feiyang was secretly speechless. Making a fake god kneel outside, I'm afraid that in the world, only this guy in front of him can do it. No matter what the reason is, I have to thank Senior for taking care of me all these years. If there's a chance in the future, Junior will definitely repay Senior." Qin Feiyang bowed and stepped on the teleportation altar, quickly disappearing. "Repay," the snow python muttered to herself. But in the next moment, she couldn't help but be annoyed. Originally, she came to stop Yan Wei, but in the end, Qin Feiyang repeatedly changed the topic, and she forgot about this matter. "Little guy, you dare to play tricks with me, just you wait. Next time you won't be able to finish your meal." She snorted coldly, flew out of the cave, and landed on the ice lake. She saw the old man in the white robe, kneeling on the snow. The snow python looked down at him condescendingly and said, "I just heard Qin Feiyang say that your Mu family often goes to the Great Qin Empire." The old man in the white robe tensed up. "This is slander." "Slander?" the snow python sneered. "Do you still remember the promise you made to me when you came to the Forgotten Continent?" "I remember." The old man in the white robe nodded. The snow python said, "Then tell me." The old man in the white robe said, "At that time, we promised that we would stay in the Forgotten Continent forever, and never set foot in the Great Qin Empire again." "That's right. At that time I couldn't bear it, so I allowed you to stay in the Forgotten Continent. But what about you? It's fine if you don't know how to be grateful, but you also went against me behind my back. Now tell me, How should I resolve this matter? The snow python said lightly. Although her tone was calm, it was filled with a great pressure. The old man in the white robe's face changed. He hurriedly said, Master, we really didn't go there. It's Qin Feiyang who is slandering us. Please investigate. Still quibbling. You've disappointed me too much. Originally, if you were willing to admit your mistakes and repent, I would be merciful and let your Mu family live. But now, the snow python's eyes flashed coldly. Hand over the gate of time and space. What? The old man in the white robe's eyes trembled. The gate of time and space is the Mu family's biggest reliance. It can even be said that the gate of time and space is related to the Mu family's lifeline. Now that they want him to hand over the gate of time and space, isn't this putting the Mu family to death? The snow python said. You can choose not to hand it over, but your Mu family will be destroyed today. The old man in the white robe's face instantly turned pale. He hurriedly said, I'll hand it over immediately. As he spoke, he took out the gate of time and space. This is the Real Gate of Time and Space. Vast and mighty. The snow python looked at the gate of time and space, then looked at the old man in the white robe. This is your last chance. Take care of yourself. After saying that, she flashed and landed in front of the old man in the white robe. She rolled up the gate of time and space and entered the ice lake without looking back. The surface of the lake gradually calmed down, and a thin layer of ice slowly condensed. The old man in the white robe powerlessly collapsed on the snow. His old face was full of pain and despair. This time, he came out with full confidence to snatch the divine crystal. However, in the end, not only did he fail to snatch the divine crystal, but he also lost the 9-star war emperor. Now even the gate of time and space is gone. This loss is too great. It can't even be described as disastrous. He regretted it in his heart. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have done it in the first place. At the same time, the hatred in his heart towards Qin Feiyang had already risen to an unprecedented level. Because all of this was caused by Qin Feiyang. Great Qin Empire. Butterfly Valley. The old man is long gone. Now the people guarding this place are the invincible Black Army of the imperial capital. In the valley, the invincible Black Army stood straight with halberds in their hands. In a blink of an eye, there are more than 100 of them. Furthermore, these people were all battle saints. The strongest person is a deputy commander of the invincible Black Army, who is a 9-star war saint. A 9-star war saint is definitely the strongest existence in the 9 states of the Great Qin Empire. Because the strongest prefecture master in the history of the 9 states is not stronger than a 9-star war saint. For example, the ugly old woman Zhu Yu was only a 9-star war saint. Therefore, in the years that the invincible Black Army has been stationed in the spirit state, the spirit state has never been peaceful. Of course, with the invincible Black Army, Wang Hong, the current prefecture master, is only in name. Swoosh! In the sky above Butterfly Valley, a white figure appeared out of thin air. It is Qin Feiyang. Who is it? Qin Feiyang didn't hide his aura at all. Therefore, the invincible Black Army stationed in the Butterfly Valley discovered him immediately. 14th Prince. However, when they saw Qin Feiyang's real face, they all changed color. Clang. Following that, one by one, they waved their halberds and rushed into the sky, surrounding Qin Feiyang. The void here was instantly filled with a murderous aura. They really think highly of me. They sent so many people to guard here. Chapter 1137. Qin Feiyang, you shouldn't have come back. Along with a loud shout, a burly man flew up to the sky. His eyes were as cold as a blade. Greetings, Deputy Commander. The invincible Black Army bowed. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the burly man and said indifferently, a 9-star battle saint is able to become the deputy commander of the invincible Black Army. It seems like the Great Qin Empire has exhausted its talents. How dare you? How dare you talk to me like this with your cultivation base? The burly man shouted. If it was in the past, he could only endure such undisguised contempt. This was because the person in front of him was the son of the Supreme Emperor. But now, this person was just a pitiful worm that everyone wanted to beat up. Even if he was killed here, no one would care. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "My cultivation base is not strong, but it is still easy for me to kill you." How arrogant! The burly man was furious. He looked at the invincible black army and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Have you forgotten the Emperor's order? Kill anyone who sees this thief." Boom! The invincible black army that surrounded Qin Feiyang suddenly unleashed their aura and attacked together. The halberds in their hands emitted a monstrous light. "Kill him," Qin Feiyang muttered to himself. If he had heard this in the past, he would have been sad and pained. But now he felt nothing. It was as if it had nothing to do with him. But he had not really let it go. He was in despair. He no longer had any hope. Without any extravagant hopes, naturally, there wouldn't be so much disappointment and emotions. Swoosh! Qin Feiyang moved his mind, and Yan Wei appeared out of thin air. "Leave no one alive," Qin Feiyang said calmly. "Understood." Yan Wei glanced at the invincible black army that was charging at him. His eyes flashed with killing intent. Boom! The Emperor's aura exploded and shocked everyone. Everyone present was instantly imprisoned in the void, including the burly man. It's a combat emperor. Why is there a battle emperor by his side? The group of people turned pale with fright, their hearts filled with disbelief. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "The last time I came back, I brought a group of fake gods with me. This time, I brought a battle god back. Is it that strange?" Everyone's heart trembled. That's right. Even a false god could be invited, let alone a mere battle varch. The burly man's face turned pale as he begged, "Your Highness, I was wrong. Please have mercy on me. Don't kill me." Begging for mercy so soon? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Originally, he thought that as the deputy commander of the invincible black army, he should have some backbone, but he didn't expect that he would be scared before the battle even started. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He said to Yan Wei, "Keep him." "All right." Yan Wei nodded. The formless emperor's aura was like a sharp blade. In the blink of an eye, it sliced through the throats of more than 100 invincible black army soldiers. The void here suddenly bled like a waterfall. Except for the burly man, no one was spared. All of them died on the spot. Seeing this scene, the burly man panicked even more. He was so scared that he peed his pants. Qin Feiyang turned to look at him and said indifferently, "I can spare your life. You betrayed the emperor and joined me." "Yes, yes." The burly man didn't hesitate at all and nodded repeatedly. Such a spineless person deserves to be killed. Yan Wei snorted coldly. "You're right, but he still has value." Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. "What value?" Yan Wei frowned. Qin Feiyang said to himself, "I have to ask him to take me to the imperial capital and cripple his cultivation." Understood. Yan Wei's eyes flashed. He pointed his index finger in the air, and a stream of battle qi entered the burly man's lower abdomen like lightning. "Ah!" The burly man immediately held his lower abdomen and howled miserably. At the same time, Qin Feiyang formed a seal with both hands. A slave seal appeared and rushed into the burly man's head. "Why did you come back?" But at this moment, an angry voice sounded. A middle-aged man in white appeared in front of Qin Feiyang. He had a square face, a rough face, thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a black eye patch on his left eye. The aura he emitted was quite powerful. He was Wang Hong. Looking at Qin Feiyang, his eyes were filled with blame and worry. Qin Feiyang laughed. "Long time no see." Still smiling mischievously, Wang Hong slightly raised his eyebrows and said, "Do you know how dangerous your current situation is?" "Does it matter?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Of course it matters. You were fine in Forgotten Continent. Why did you come back to die?" Wang Hong said angrily. "Die? I never thought that I was sending myself to death," Qin Feiyang said. "You," looking at Qin Feiyang's innocent expression, Wang Hong was so angry that he glared. At this moment, the burly man shouted, "Wang Hong, I'm ordering you to take him down." Wang Hong glanced at the burly man, then looked at Qin Feiyang, his expression uncertain. Qin Feiyang sighed. "Actually, you shouldn't have come out." If he didn't come out, Wang Hong could pretend that he didn't see him. But since he came out, as the Spirit State's mansion master, he couldn't sit idly by. But I came out. Wang Hong said. Qin Feiyang said. You and the old man are really alike, but you are both blindly loyal, do you know that? Wang Hong said. Blindly loyal or stupid, I am a subject, so I must do my duty. Sigh. I really never thought that one day we would become enemies. Qin Feiyang sighed deeply. I also never thought that there would be such a day. Wang Hong shook his head. Then make your move. I will also do my best to show my respect for you. Qin Feiyang said. Boom. The aura of a 4-star battle saint exploded. What? 4-star battle saint. The burly man's gaze trembled. How long had it been since Qin Feiyang caused havoc in the imperial city? He had already stepped into the realm of a 4-star battle saint. Wang Hong was even more incredulous. Thinking back, when this kid first entered the state capital, he was only a battle king. In just a few years, he had climbed to such a height, leaving others in the dust. However, Yanwei frowned and sent a sound transmission to Qin Feiyang. I can see that the relationship between the two of you was very good in the past. Is it really okay for you to attack without holding back like this? He could see through Wang Hong's cultivation at a glance. He was only a battle master. Facing the current Qin Feiyang, he was no match for him. I know Wang Hong's character very well. Hiding one's strength and giving in to him is the greatest disrespect to him. Qin Feiyang said to himself. So that's how it is. Yanwei suddenly understood. Boom. Wang Hong's body shook and his aura surged out. Even though I know that I'm no longer your opponent, I still want to try. I want to see how much you've grown. Wang Hong took a step forward and threw a punch at Qin Feiyang. Then feel it carefully. Qin Feiyang struck out with his palm. In an instant, the fist and palm collided. Boom. With a loud sound, Wang Hong's arm was torn into pieces on the spot. Blood splattered across the sky. Immediately after, like a meteorite, he smashed into the butterfly valley below. Dust and smoke rose in all directions and a deep pit appeared. Then he never got up again. He lay at the bottom of the deep pit, his life and death unknown. However, there was a faint gratified smile on his blood-stained face. Qin Feiyang also smiled. Immediately, he turned to look at the burly man and said, You'd better not try anything because after being controlled by the slave seal, I can clearly peek into your inner thoughts and can even erase your soul in an instant. What? The burly man's eyes trembled. Qin Feiyang said, Quickly take the spiritual sea pill, and then take us to the imperial capital. Yes. The burly man quickly nodded and took out a spiritual sea pill and put it into his mouth. Qin Feiyang didn't look at Wang Hong anymore. He landed in front of a dead soldier of the invincible Black Army. He took off the armor and put it on. Then he swallowed an illusion pill and changed into an unfamiliar face. Time passed by breath. After the burly man repaired his sea of qi and wiped the blood off his body, he took Qin Feiyang to the secret chamber below the Butterfly Valley. As for Yanwei, Qin Feiyang sent him to the castle. As for Wang Hong, Qin Feiyang of course would not really kill him. He just made him faint. After a while, Qin Feiyang and the burly man entered the secret chamber and came to the teleportation altar. Qin Feiyang looked at the burly man and said, You should have family in the imperial capital, right? What do you want to do? The burly man was surprised. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I just want to tell you, don't play any tricks. Otherwise, not only will you die, but your family will also be implicated. He was worried that this person was not afraid of death and appeared in the pagoda, exposing his identity in front of Old Man Qin. One had to know. Old Man Qin was not only a false god, but the pagoda was also located in the back mountain of the imperial palace. If his identity was exposed, he would not be able to escape even if he had a pair of wings. That was why he threatened this person so that he would completely give up. You're a demon. The burly man shouted. Qin Feiyang said lightly, Since you know I'm a demon, why do you still want to provoke me? The burly man held his breath and then sighed helplessly. Battle chi surged, and the teleportation altar quickly recovered. Pagoda. 9 blood-red altars were neatly arranged on the ground, emitting an ancient and cold aura. Next to each altar, there was a stone tablet with different words engraved on it. Ling state, Yun state, He state, You state, Feng state, etc. The 9 altars were dim. Suddenly, the teleportation altar of Ling State suddenly shone with a resplendent blood light. 2 figures appeared on the altar out of thin air. It was Qin Feiyang and the burly man. At the same time as the altar recovered, the pagoda's door opened rapidly. Outside the door, an old man with white hair and a white beard stood. His white robes were spotless and his aura was otherworldly. He was the guardian of the pagoda, Old Man Qin. Greetings, Old Man Qin. Qin Feiyang jumped down from the altar and followed behind the burly man. He walked quickly to Old Man Qin and bowed. Old Man Qin glanced at Qin Feiyang, and then at the burly man asking, "Do you have news of Qin Feiyang?" "No." The burly man shook his head. Old Man Qin frowned and shouted, "Then why did you come back? Don't you know that leaving your post without permission will result in death?" "Spare me, Old Man Qin." The burly man knelt on the ground hurriedly and said, "I have something important to do and have to return home. Old Man Qin, please make an exception. I promise that it won't take more than 3 days." Old Man Qin frowned and said, 3 days is too long. 1 day at most. You have to return to Butterfly Valley tomorrow morning." "All right. Thank you, Old Man Qin." The burly man was grateful. With that said, he stood up and opened the teleportation gate, bringing Qin Feiyang in. Wait. But suddenly. Chapter 1138. Have we been discovered? Qin Feiyang and Old Man Qin's body stiffened. They stopped, looked at each other, braced themselves and turned to look at Old Man Qin. The burly man asked, "Old Man Qin, what can I do for you?" He was extremely nervous. Old Man Qin said, "I heard that the Invincible Black Army and the Kirin Army are very close to the Imperial Preceptor." Qin Feiyang secretly breathed a sigh of relief. However, Old Man Qin's question aroused his interest. At the same time, in the face of Old Man Qin's sudden question, the burly man was also a little unprepared. Old Man Qin looked at the burly man and said, "I don't want to hear any lies." "I don't dare." The burly man quickly lowered his head and said fearfully, "Then say it." Old Man Qin said. The burly man hesitated for a moment, looked up at Old Man Qin and said, "To be honest, it's not that we are very close to the Imperial Preceptor. It's because the Imperial Preceptor has a high status, and we dare not disobey his orders." Old Man Qin said, "Then what do you think of the Imperial Preceptor?" After that, Old Man Qin looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "You can also tell me your opinion." Qin Feiyang was stunned and hurriedly shook his head. "I don't dare to talk nonsense. It doesn't matter. There's no one here except me. And what you're going to say next, I won't mention it to anyone," Old Man Qin said. Qin Feiyang turned to look at the burly man. The burly man also looked very embarrassed and didn't speak for a long time. Looking at the expressions of the two, Old Man Qin frowned, and then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "You say it." Qin Feiyang said in fear, "Old Man Qin, I'm just an ordinary soldier in the Invincible Black Army. How dare I evaluate the Imperial Preceptor?" "Just say it. Why are you talking nonsense? Moreover, because you're an ordinary soldier in the Invincible Black Army, I want to hear your opinion the most. After all, the people who are in contact with the Imperial Preceptor the most are some commanders. It's hard to guarantee that they won't be soft-mouthed." Old Man Qin glanced at the burly man as he spoke. The burly man's eyes trembled. Old Qin's words could be said to have a profound meaning. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He cupped his hands and said, "Then I will speak frankly." "Yes." Old Man Qin nodded. Qin Feiyang said, "This lowly one thinks that Imperial Preceptor is deceiving his superiors and concealing the truth with one hand." Old Qin's eyes instantly emitted a fierce light when he heard this, and he seemed to be overbearing. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "How do you know?" Although the Grand Preceptor always says that he is thinking for His Majesty, many people know that he has a hidden agenda, Qin Feiyang said. "Continue." Old Qin said, "I won't mention those trivial matters. Let's just talk about Qin Feiyang." Back then, the imperial tutor guessed that Qin Feiyang might be in the Forgotten Continent. Logically speaking, he should have reported such an important matter to His Majesty as soon as possible. But he didn't. He directly sent the great commander to the Forgotten Continent to kill Qin Feiyang. This is enough to show that his motive for killing Qin Feiyang is not simple. There is one more thing. This lowly one heard that the imperial preceptor once went to the Forgotten Continent alone. Qin Feiyang said. Old Qin's eyes flashed. He was silent. Qin Feiyang also did not say anything, because he believed that with old Qin's intelligence, he would definitely be able to hear something from his words. For him, this could be considered a piece of good news, because old Qin definitely did not ask this on a whim. He definitely already suspected the imperial preceptor. A moment later, old Qin waved his hand and said, "Okay, you can leave." This lowly one will take his leave. Qin Feiyang and the burly man bowed and saluted. Then, they opened another teleportation gate and walked in one after another. Inner city. In a luxurious mansion. In front of a hall. Qin Feiyang and the burly man appeared out of thin air. "Sir." Outside the main hall, for guards were standing straight. Seeing the burly man suddenly appear, the four were stunned. "Sir, aren't you in the spirit state? Why did you suddenly come back? Could it be that you already know Qin Feiyang's whereabouts?" When they came back to their senses, the four hurriedly went up and asked. "There is still no news of Qin Feiyang. This time, I came back to take care of something. You guys guard outside. Without my order, no one is allowed to come in." The burly man glanced at the four and ordered. Then, he led Qin Feiyang straight into the hall. After closing the door, the burly man turned to Qin Feiyang and said, "I have brought you into the imperial capital. Now, shouldn't you also remove the slave seal? Do you think I am stupid? If I remove the slave seal now, you will immediately inform the imperial preceptor and the emperor. Then won't I become a turtle in a jar?" Qin Feiyang sneered. The burly man's eyes darkened as he asked, "Then, when will you be willing to remove the slave seal?" "Don't be hasty. When I am safe, I will naturally set you free." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. The burly man said in a deep voice, "This time, you came back to see the Empress. But now, the Empress is imprisoned in the Violet Light Palace and is guarded by the Kirin army. Without my help, you can't enter at all." Violet Light Palace. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists as a cold light flashed in his eyes. He glanced at the burly man and sneered. "If you want to use this to threaten me, then you are gravely mistaken." With that, he took out the image crystal. Buzz. A moment later, a middle-aged man appeared in the void. He was thin but as straight as a pine tree. He wore a purple armor, and his hair was mottled with white hair. He exuded an aura of vicissitudes. And on his battle armor, there was an eye-catching Qilin pattern. That's right. He was the commander of the Kirin army. "You are." Looking at Qin Feiyang, the commander of the Kirin army had a trace of suspicion on his face. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "We haven't seen each other for half a year. Have you already forgotten me?" "Haven't seen each other for half a year?" The commander of the Kirin army was even more confused. "Looks like I need to remind you." Qin Feiyang smiled. With a slight thought, he activated the slave seal. The commander of the Kirin army immediately held his head and cried out in pain. Qin Feiyang stopped activating the slave seal and smiled. "Now do you know who I am? It's you. You dare to come back?" The commander of the Kirin army looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. Ever since he was controlled by Qin Feiyang, he had been trying to find a way to break the slave seal, but no matter what he did, he could not break it. So, when he felt the familiar pain, he immediately knew who the person in front of him was. "Come to my place right now. I'm at the mansion of the deputy commander of the Invincible Black Army." Qin Feiyang then gave the commander of the Kirin army a set of coordinates. In less than 3 breaths, the commander of the Kirin army landed in the Grand Hall, and looked at Qin Feiyang with a trace of surprise in his eyes. He asked, "You've reached the 4-star Battle Saint realm?" Qin Feiyang nodded. "Good job." The commander of the Kirin army gave him a thumbs up. Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "How's my mother?" The commander of the Kirin army didn't answer. Instead, he glanced at the burly man. Qin Feiyang thought to himself, "Don't worry. When this is over, I'll make him disappear from the spiritual state." The commander of the Kirin army narrowed his eyes and sighed. "Can you stop messing around? This won't do you any good. Do you think there's any room for improvement in my relationship with the emperor? Qin Feiyang sneered. Why not? As long as you lower your head and apologize, I'm sure the emperor will forgive you, the commander of the Kirin army said. I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I lower my head and apologize to him? He's the one who should apologize, Qin Feiyang said. Alas! The commander of the Kirin army sighed deeply and said with a smile, although Her Majesty was sent to the Violet Light Palace, she's been doing well since she saw you last time. Her complexion is much better than before. Qin Feiyang asked, has he visited my mother? Of course he was referring to the emperor. No. The commander of the Kirin army shook his head and said, are you disappointed? I've never expected anything. Why would I be disappointed? Qin Feiyang sneered and said, I want to see my mother. The commander of the Kirin army looked troubled. You don't have a choice. Qin Feiyang said, okay. The commander of the Kirin army nodded and took out a set of Kirin army armor and handed it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang took off the invincible Black Army's armor and quickly put it on. Then, he looked at the commander of the Qilin army and said, last time, you betrayed me in the Divine Penitentiary and almost caused me to lose my life. Until now, I still remember it. If you dare to play any tricks this time, I will definitely not show mercy. The commander of the Kirin army smiled bitterly and opened a portal. He turned around and walked in. Wait for me here. Qin Feiyang instructed the tall and sturdy man. Then he turned around and followed in. The Violet Light Palace. It was located in the outskirts of the palace. It was very remote, and only the unfavored concubines would be sent here. In other words, it was equivalent to the Cold Palace. Once the concubines were sent here, their lives were basically hopeless. This was why Qin Feiyang was so angry when he heard about the Violet Light Palace. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang and the burly man appeared in front of a hall. Greetings, Commander. Outside the main hall, the Qilin army was on guard every 3 steps and a sentry every 7 steps. They were extremely vigilant. The commander of the Kirin army asked, where is Her Majesty? One of them said respectfully, Her Majesty is inside. Open the door. The commander of the Kirin army said. Yes. The man turned around and walked to the door of the hall and pushed it open. The commander of the Kirin army strode in with Qin Feiyang. The decoration in the hall was very simple. Except for a table and a few stools, there was nothing else. It looked empty and cold. The only tables and stools in the room were also very old and shabby. But it was very clean and spotless. However, Qin Feiyang didn't see his mother in the hall. The commander of the Kirin army said, Her Majesty should be on the 2nd floor. Go up quickly. I'll wait for you downstairs. However, Qin Feiyang didn't move. He looked at the commander of the Kirin army with a cold light in his eyes. The commander of the Kirin army sighed and said, Don't worry. I won't inform His Majesty and the state preceptor this time. You'd better. A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes. He took off the armor on his body and took out a pure white robe from his Qingquan bag. He put it on neatly, and then took a facial restoration pill. After that, he recovered his true appearance, and walked towards the 2nd floor. At this moment, a woman in white was sitting at a wooden table in the hall on the 2nd floor. Although her clothes were a bit old, it didn't affect her temperament. Chapter 1139. On the table, there was water, flour, and sugar. The woman sat in front of the table with a rosy face, making all kinds of exquisite pastries. 2 maids sat beside her to help. One of the maids said with a smile, Your Highness, if His Highness knows that you make so many pastries for him every day, he will be so touched. Really? The woman in white asked with a smile. Of course. I just don't know when His Highness will come back. The 2 female attendants spoke, and there was a trace of disappointment on their faces. The woman in white looked up outside the window and said with a smile, He will come back sooner or later. Tada! Before she finished speaking, there was a sound of footsteps. Someone is coming. Who would come here? It can't be His Majesty, can it? The two maids heard the footsteps and immediately looked up at the stairs outside with a trace of suspicion on their faces. Let's go and see. The woman in white smiled. Okay. The two maids put down what they were doing and got up to walk to the stairs. But after taking 2 steps, they were stunned. At the entrance of the staircase, a familiar figure slowly walked up. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? The two maids looked at each other for a long time. Their faces were full of disbelief. When they rubbed their eyes and looked again, they saw that the familiar figure was already standing outside the hall. That's right. This person was Qin Feiyang. He stood outside the door and looked at his mother's back. His eyes couldn't help but warm up. At the same time, the woman in white also noticed the reaction of the two maids. She looked at the two of them in confusion and asked with a smile, "Who is it that made you so surprised?" "It's..." The two maids pointed at Qin Feiyang outside the door and stammered, unable to say a complete sentence for a long time. The more the woman in white looked, the more curious she became, so she turned to look outside the door. Immediately, the smile on her face froze. "Mother!" Qin Feiyang called softly, tears flowing down uncontrollably. Hearing this familiar call, the woman in white trembled and slowly got up. She looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze, feeling as if she was dreaming. "Mother, I'm back." Qin Feiyang muttered softly as he walked towards his mother. Even when Qin Feiyang walked in front of her, the white-clothed woman still hadn't come back to her senses. Wait. Suddenly, the two maids seemed to have thought of something. They stepped in front of the white-clothed woman and looked at Qin Feiyang vigilantly. Qin Feiyang was stunned. What did he mean? The white-clothed woman finally regained her senses and looked at the two of them in confusion. "Your Majesty, His Majesty went to the Forgotten Continent. He shouldn't have returned so quickly. Furthermore, even if Your Highness returns, the invincible Black Army guarding the Butterfly Valley will definitely stop Your Highness and immediately report it to Her Majesty. But now there's no movement from the Imperial Palace at all, so we suspect that he's an imposter." Qin Feiyang was quite surprised by the two maids' logical analysis. He didn't expect that the two maids by his mother's side were so smart. Of course, he definitely wouldn't be angry because of this. Because the reason why these two maids were so vigilant was for his mother's safety. In other words, these two maids were sincere and loyal to his mother's side. After listening to the two maids' words, the white-clothed woman's eyebrows also had a trace of vigilance. Qin Feiyang didn't say anything. He directly took out the Heaven's Eye Stone and held it in his hand. Time passed breath by breath. The Heaven's Eye Stone didn't react at all. Qin Feiyang's appearance also didn't change at all. "It's really you, Feiyang." The white-clothed woman looked at the Heaven's Eye Stone and looked at Qin Feiyang's face. Her eyes couldn't help but become misty. "Mother." Qin Feiyang put away the Heaven's Eye Stone and was about to dive into his mother's arms to enjoy the long-lost motherly love. But at this moment, one of the maids stretched out her hand and stopped Qin Feiyang. "What else do you want?" Qin Feiyang was a little annoyed. The maid took out another Heaven's Eye Stone from her Qianquan bag and handed it to Qin Feiyang, saying, "I can't help but suspect that your Heaven's Eye Stone has been tampered with. So I have to try again with my Heaven's Eye Stone." Qin Feiyang's face darkened. The joy of reuniting after a long time disappeared in an instant. He grabbed the Heaven's Eye Stone. A moment later, the Heaven's Eye Stone and his face still didn't change at all. Qin Feiyang looked at the two maids and said, "Sisters, do you believe me now?" "This." The two women looked at each other. Ecstasy crawled up their faces in an instant. They hurriedly knelt on one knee and said respectfully, "Greetings, Your Highness." Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead, his face full of helplessness. The white-clothed woman smiled and said, "Feiyang, don't blame them. They have good intentions." "I know." Qin Feiyang nodded. He looked at the two maids and said with a smile, "Both of you get up. I'm no longer Your Highness. Don't be so courteous to me." "No. In our eyes you've always been our 14th Highness." The two maids got up and looked at Qin Feiyang with resolute eyes. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at his mother's face. Indeed, as the commander of the Kirin army said, his mother's condition was much better than before. She looked full of energy. "Come, let mother see if you've changed." The white-clothed woman grabbed Qin Feiyang's hand and sat by the wooden table. She carefully looked at Qin Feiyang from head to toe. Qin Feiyang remained silent with a smile on his face. A moment later, the white-clothed woman smiled and said, "You've changed. You've become more mature, more steady, and more charming. There should be many girls who like you." "Mother," Qin Feiyang's face turned red. The two maids looked at each other and couldn't help but snicker. "You're still laughing?" Qin Feiyang stared at them. He had a lot of things to say to his mother, but he didn't know what to say after these two girls made fun of him. The two girls had been with the white-clothed woman for many years. They were loyal and devoted. When they saw Qin Feiyang staring at them, not only were they not afraid, they even stuck out their tongues at Qin Feiyang. They looked quite cute. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly. "Your Highness, when did you come back? Why is there no movement at all?" "Yeah, isn't it strange? Did your Highness bribe the invincible Black Army in Butterfly Valley?" The two girls asked curiously. "Yeah, Feiyang, what's going on?" The white-clothed woman also thought of this and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, "How can I bribe them? However, I can still kill them." "Kill them? I heard that the invincible Black Army isn't the only one guarding Butterfly Valley. There's also a deputy commander of the invincible Black Army. He is a 9-star battle saint." The two maids were bewildered. "So what if he's a 9-star battle saint?" Qin Feiyang sneered. The two maids held their breaths. Aren't these words too domineering? The white-clothed woman was slightly taken aback. Then, she carefully sized up Qin Feiyang's cultivation. Her eyes suddenly lit up and said, "You've broken through to 4-star battle saint?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "So fast. Your Highness is indeed the #1 monstrous genius of the Great Qin Empire." The two maids were shocked and their eyes were filled with admiration. However, one of the maids quickly said, "That's not right. Even if your Highness is a 4-star battle saint, it's impossible for you to kill a 9-star battle saint." "I say, why do you have so many questions? Can't you let me get along with my mother?" Qin Feiyang was angry. "Aren't we just happy? Since your Highness is impatient, we won't ask any more." The two maids smiled embarrassedly and retreated behind the white-clothed woman. Then they kept quiet. Qin Feiyang was extremely helpless. He looked at the white-clothed woman and asked in confusion, "Mother, isn't it forbidden to bring maids into the Amethyst Palace? Why are they here?" "We have to thank the commander of the Kirin army for this. Yes, he's a good person." The two maids spoke again. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "When Her Highness was sent to the Amethyst Palace, we also wanted to come with her. After all, Her Highness has treated us like family all these years. We couldn't bear to part with her. But His Majesty didn't allow it. He said that the people of the Cold Palace didn't need maids to serve them. Later, the commander of the Kirin army came to visit Her Highness. Seeing that Her Highness was too lonely and bored here, he went to His Majesty to plead for Her Highness. After several pleas, His Majesty finally agreed to let us come over to accompany Her Highness." The two maids sighed. Hearing these words, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but clench his fists. As the saying goes, a day together as husband and wife means endless devotion for the rest of your life. Was there a need to go so far? Not even 2 maidservants? All right, it's all in the past. Don't mention it again." The white-clothed woman waved her hand and smiled. Looking at Qin Feiyang, she said, "Tell me, what have you been doing in the Forgotten Continent for the past half a year?" "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he recounted his experiences during this period without holding back. The white-clothed woman was shocked to hear it. Her heart ached and she was proud. Her heart ached because in just a few months, he had experienced so many hardships. Her pride was because Qin Feiyang was able to survive under the pursuit of so many powerhouses. Just this ability alone was enough to leave anyone in the dust. It's all Mother's fault for not being able to give you a peaceful environment, causing you to encounter so many setbacks at such a young age. She blamed herself. No, I have never blamed Mother, nor do I have the right to blame Mother. On the contrary, I hate myself. Why am I so weak that I have to get permission from others to stay by my mother's side? Qin Feiyang lowered his head, his hands tightly clenched together. Looking at Qin Feiyang's pained expression, the two maids' hearts ached and tears flowed down. The white-clothed woman couldn't help but feel sad. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the three of them. Releasing his hands, he smiled and said, "It's not easy to meet mother. Let's not talk about these unhappy things." Yes, let's not talk about it." The white-clothed woman nodded, then looked at the two maids, pointed at the pastries on the table, and said with a smile, "Go steam these pastries and let Feiyang have a taste." Pastries? At this time, Qin Feiyang noticed that there were all kinds of pastries on the table. He asked suspiciously, "Mother, you're the only one here. Why did you make so many pastries?" One of the maids said, "Her Majesty made these especially for you." "For me?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and said in surprise, "Mother knew that I would come back today." "No." The white-clothed woman shook her head. Qin Feiyang was stunned and even more puzzled. She didn't know, but she made so many? "Your Highness, you don't know, but ever since you left, Her Majesty has been making these pastries every day. Because Her Majesty didn't know when you would come back. She just hoped that you could eat the pastries she made the moment you came back, so that you could feel the warmth of home." Chapter 1140. Every day. Qin Feiyang trembled both physically and mentally as he looked at the woman in white. The woman in white smiled and said, "Now that you've grown up, there's nothing I can do for you. I can only do these for you. These are enough." Qin Feiyang nodded hard. His voice was sobbing as he tried to control the emotions that were about to collapse in his heart. Although this was just a small matter, anyone could do it once in a while. But day after day, year after year, he believed that no one in the world could do it except his great mother. Every single one of these pastries represented her longing and motherly love. Glancing at Qin Feiyang, the two maids didn't say anything. They silently cleaned up the pastries on the table, feeling sad. Qin Feiyang and the woman in white were also silent. The atmosphere in the hall seemed a little heavy. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang gritted his teeth and looked at the woman in white, saying, "Mother, come with me." The woman in white was stunned. She shook her head and was about to speak. Qin Feiyang said again, "I know Mother has her difficulties and can't leave the capital, but it's okay to leave for a while, right? I just want to live with Mother alone for a while. Even if it's only for a month, or even half a month." The woman in white lowered her head and didn't say anything. Alas! At this time, a sigh sounded. Then, the commander of the Kirin army walked into the hall and looked at the woman in white, saying, "Your Majesty, if you just leave for a month or so, it shouldn't be a problem." Qin Feiyang, the woman in white, and the two maids immediately looked up at the commander of the Kirin army. The commander of the Kirin army said, "His Majesty and the state preceptor won't come here unless something important happens. So as long as we don't say anything, no one will know that you've left. I'll try my best to hold them back and not let them come here while you're away. But what if they find out? Not only you will be implicated, but they will also be held accountable." The woman in white said, "Your Majesty, we're not afraid." The two maids immediately said in unison. The commander of the Kirin army smiled and said, "I'm not afraid. At worst, I'll be dismissed." The woman in white shook her head. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Feiyang, I also want to go out with you and have a look. However, I have already killed Qin Zhong and Qin Yi. I can't implicate them anymore. Can you understand?" Qin Feiyang closed his eyes and nodded painfully. "I understand." "Empress." The two maids still wanted to say something. However, the white-clothed woman frowned and shouted, "Don't forget who you are." The two maids turned pale, and didn't dare to persuade him again. They took the pastries and left. Although the white-clothed woman was very amiable right now, once she got angry, let alone these maids, even the civil and military officials would be afraid. The Qilin army commander sighed deeply and didn't say anything more. He turned around and left silently. The woman in white looked at Qin Feiyang guiltily and said with a smile, "Child, can you forgive your mother?" "Mother, you're too serious." Qin Feiyang squeezed out a stiff smile and asked, "By the way, How is the little prince now? The woman in white smiled and said, Your father cares about him and takes care of him. Of course he's very good. Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up and said angrily, He's not my father. The woman in white's smile froze. Qin Feiyang immediately realized that he had lost his composure. He quickly lowered his head and said, I'm sorry, mother. I shouldn't be angry at you. It's okay. The woman in white waved her hand, but her eyes were a little sad. When would the grudge between this father and son be resolved? After a while, the two maids returned with 2 plates of piping hot pastries. The woman in white grabbed a piece of pastry and handed it to Qin Feiyang. She smiled and said, Eat some. Qin Feiyang nodded and took a bite. Suddenly his eyes were filled with tears. It still tasted the same as when he was young. Eat more if you like it. The woman in white smiled. Okay. Qin Feiyang held back his collapsing emotions. He picked up the jade plate and stuffed the pastries into his mouth one by one. His mouth couldn't hold them all. He didn't know what to say. But he knew that he had to finish these pastries. Because these were made for him by his mother. It was his mother's love for him. When the two maids saw this scene, they silently shed tears. They felt injustice for Qin Feiyang. He was such a good prince. Why did the emperor treat him so ruthlessly? He didn't want much. He just wanted to be with his mother. And in the world, which child didn't want to be with his mother? However, the emperor wanted to deprive her of even this. She had to meet him secretly. That was too cruel. The 2 plates of pastries were wolfed down by Qin Feiyang just like that. He put down the jade plate, wiped the tears on his face, got up, looked at the woman in white, and said, Mother, I'm leaving. So soon? The woman in white was a little caught off guard. I have something important to do, Qin Feiyang said. The woman in white got up and said, Well, you have to take good care of yourself outside. Don't tire yourself out. I know. Qin Feiyang nodded, turned to the 2 maids, bowed, and said, I'll have to trouble you 2 to take good care of my mother in the future. We will. The 2 maids nodded. Qin Feiyang knelt on the ground. After kowtowing to his mother 3 times, he got up resolutely and quickly disappeared from the sight of the 3. His Highness doesn't have anything important to do. He doesn't want to stay any longer. One of the maids sighed. Yes. His Highness's love for Her Highness is deep in his bones. He's afraid that the longer he stays, the more reluctant he will be to leave Her Highness. The other maid sighed in a low voice. Hearing the 2 maids' words, the woman in white trembled and murmured, Feiyang, I'm sorry. Back to Qin Feiyang. He walked down the stairs silently. Just as the 2 maids said, he didn't want to stay any longer. He was afraid that if he stayed any longer, he would be reluctant to leave his mother. Now, as long as he knew that his mother was well, he could rest assured. Why did you come down so quickly? The commander of the Kirin army stood in the center of the hall and asked Qin Feiyang. But when he saw the tears on Qin Feiyang's face, he regretted asking that. Qin Feiyang didn't answer him. He said, Help me keep an eye out. I don't want my mother to be hurt again. After saying that, he opened a teleportation door. The commander of the Kirin army nodded and asked, What's your next plan? I don't know. Qin Feiyang shook his head. His eyes were full of confusion. Then he walked into the portal without looking back. The next moment, he appeared beside the burly man, put on the armor of the invincible Black Army, and changed his appearance. Then he said lightly, Let's go. Okay. The burly man nodded. About 100 breaths later, the 2 of them arrived in the sky above the Butterfly Valley again. Qin Feiyang took off his armor and looked down. The corpses of the invincible Black Army soldiers who died in the hands of Yan Wei were still there. However, Wang Hong was nowhere to be seen. He should have returned to the city. Can you help me remove the slave seal now? The burly man looked at Qin Feiyang's back and asked anxiously. Qin Feiyang didn't answer. With a thought, he erased the burly man's soul. The burly man didn't even have the chance to scream before he fell down. The world is so big. Where should I go now? Qin Feiyang looked at the sky and muttered to himself. Then he stepped into the air and gradually disappeared into the vast sky. Now, he was completely lost. He didn't know what to do. He even doubted whether everything he had done and persevered for all these years had any meaning. Next, he was just like a walking corpse, walking aimlessly. He went to the city. He saw Luo Qianxue, Mermaid Princess, Lu Yun, Lin Yi, Yin Nanshan and Yuanming. He visited everyone who was related to him one by one. He even visited his former opponents or some people who were not close to him, such as Huang San, who was a passerby in his life. However, he didn't show up, nor did he greet them. He hid his cultivation and disguised himself as a stranger. He stood in the crowd and looked at them from afar. He didn't know why he did this. He just felt empty in his heart. What did he want to fill? Next, he went to Yin City and Black Bear City. There were many acquaintances in these two places, such as Elder One of the Martial Arts Hall, the beautiful woman Ji Shui, and Li Ji. There was also the Ling family, which was Ling Yunfei's clansman. There was also the Jiang family, which was Jiang Jingyi's clansman. He also went to see Luo Qingzhu's cousin, Jiang Wei. This person was an out-and-out playboy back then. However, after being taught a lesson by him, he restrained himself. After all these years, Jiang Wei's previous bad habits had been completely changed. He had become a good young man that everyone praised. His cultivation had also improved a lot. He was now a 9-star battle monarch. 9-star battle monarch was naturally incomparable to Qin Feiyang. However, in the entire Yin County, he was considered one of the best among the younger generation. However, Qin Feiyang still didn't greet anyone. He walked silently on the street like a loner. Finally, he returned to Iron Ox Town. Inside a simple and crude tea house, Qin Feiyang was wearing a set of shabby linen clothes. He was sitting by a window, drinking bitter tea while scanning the streets outside. Iron Ox Town hadn't changed much over the years. Most people were still very simple and amiable. However, due to Lin Chang's death, the former Lin family had long since fallen from grace and had declined significantly. The Zhao family was still there. The Zhao family was Zhao Shuang'er's family. However, the Zhao family wasn't like the Lin family. Under the leadership of Zhao Shuang, Er's grandfather, the current Zhao family was several times stronger than before. Excluding the martial arts hall and Dan Hall, it was already the strongest overlord of Iron Ox Town. Zhao family. Zhao Shuang. If Zhao Shuang'er didn't die, perhaps the Zhao family today would be even stronger. Qin Feiyang whispered. Back then in the Swallowpan mountain range, the scene of Fengling Air, Zhao Shuang, Ling Yunfei, Luo Qingzhu, and Jiang Jingyi being killed by Zuan and the others was still vivid in his mind. If everyone didn't die, aside from Jiang Jingyi, with the talent of Luo Qingzhu and the others, they would probably be the same as Lin Yi, the pride of the state capital. Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed, took out a few gold coins, put them on the table, got up, and left Iron Ox Town. In the end, he returned to the place where he had lived with Uncle Yuan for 5 years. Over the years, this place had already changed beyond recognition. Even the burned wooden building had been covered by vegetation. However, although everything no longer existed, and Uncle Yuan had left without a trace, Qin Feiyang's heart calmed down as soon as he came here. Although I was born in the imperial capital and my mother is also in the imperial capital, this is my home. Chapter 1141. After that, Qin Feiyang did not go anywhere else. It took him 3 days to build a courtyard. He also built an artificial lake in front of the courtyard. From then on, Qin Feiyang stayed here. During the day, he fished by the lake. At night, he cultivated in the courtyard. He had 3 meals a day, rain or shine. His empty heart became more and more full with each passing day as he lived such a peaceful life. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Boom. That night, his cultivation level broke through to a 5-star battle saint. However, the breakthrough did not disturb his peaceful life. Everything was still the same as before. He was like a hermit who lived in seclusion in the forest. He did not pay attention to the outside world and lived an ordinary life. One day in the morning, a burly man in golden armor landed in the sky above Butterfly Valley. Where is he? Looking at the dead silent Butterfly Valley, the burly man in golden armor could not help but frown. Suddenly, he fixed his gaze on a certain spot below. There were hundreds of corpses lying on the ground, and there were signs of decomposition. What happened? The burly man in golden armor was in disbelief. Where is Wang Hong? Suddenly, he raised his head and roared. His voice was as loud as a bell and pierced through the clouds. Swish. Zung. Wang Hong appeared in the sky above Butterfly Valley. Looking at the corpses below, his expression changed. The burly man in golden armor looked at Wang Hong and asked gloomily, "What happened?" "I don't know." Wang Hong shook his head. Hundreds of invincible Black Army soldiers were killed, including a deputy commander. "You tell me that you don't know?" The burly man in golden armor was furious. Wang Hong's body trembled. He quickly said, "I really don't know. I have been in the city all this time, and have never been to Butterfly Valley." The burly man in golden armor looked at Wang Hong carefully. Seeing that Wang Hong was not lying, he asked, "You didn't hear anything?" "No." Wang Hong shook his head again. In fact, he happened to be in Butterfly Valley at that time. If he denied it now, it was obvious that he was protecting Qin Feiyang. This is strange. Who has the ability to kill these invincible Black Army soldiers silently? The golden-armored man furrowed his brows. Wang Hong nodded and said, "It is indeed very strange. The deputy commander is a 9-star battle saint. To be able to kill him silently, this person's strength should be." Speaking of which, both of their eyes trembled as they exclaimed in unison, "Battle the Arch." The golden-armored man's face darkened as he asked in surprise, "Could it be that Qin Feiyang has returned?" "Qin Feiyang?" Wang Hong was startled, then shook his head. "I don't think it's him, because he's a very smart person. It's impossible for him to come back and die. Furthermore, with his cultivation, it's impossible for him to break through to the War King so quickly." That makes sense. But it's too strange for someone to die in Butterfly Valley. I'll return to the imperial capital immediately and report this matter. You should bring some people to investigate as well. See if there are any suspicious people in the city recently. If there is, no matter who it is, act first and report later. A cold light flashed in the golden-armored man's eyes, and then he rushed toward the teleportation altar in the secret chamber below. "Farewell, my lord." Wang Hong bowed to see him off. After the golden-armored man disappeared, Wang Hong looked up at the sky and murmured, "It seems that the spiritual state is about to change." Then he opened a portal and left. Noon. The golden-armored man descended on the Butterfly Valley again. But this time he wasn't alone. He was followed by a large group of invincible Black Army soldiers. At a glance, there were at least 1,000 people. Each of them was emitting a murderous aura. The golden-armored man yelled, "Divide into 10 teams of 100 people each. Start from the imperial capital and start a thorough search. Bring back all the people and beasts above the war saint level." Understood. The invincible Black Army soldiers roared and scattered, disappearing in all directions like lightning. Meanwhile, in the godly palace of the imperial capital, in a certain alchemy room, a white-clothed young man sat cross-legged with his eyes closed meditating. Dong. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The white-clothed young man opened his eyes and looked at the stone door. "Come in." The stone door opened, and a red-haired man in his 20s walked into the cultivation room. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, master." "What's the matter?" the white-clothed young man asked. The red-haired man said, "I just received news that the invincible Black Army soldiers guarding the Butterfly Valley were all killed, including the deputy commander." "What?" The white-clothed young man stood up with shock in his eyes. The red-haired man said, "Master, do you think he came back?" "You mean Qin Feiyang?" the white-clothed young man asked. "Those invincible Black Army soldiers are very powerful. No one in the spiritual state can kill them. Besides, who doesn't know the name of the invincible Black Army in the Empire of Great Qin? Ordinary people don't dare to touch them. Most importantly, this happened in the Butterfly Valley, so only Qin Feiyang could do it," the red-haired man said. "That makes sense." The white-clothed young man nodded. "I also found out that the dead vice commander made a trip back to the imperial capital 3 months ago. Soon after, he left again." The red-haired man said. "He went back to the imperial capital." The white-clothed young man's eyes flashed as he asked, How long has it been since the invincible Black Army soldiers died in the Butterfly Valley? The red-haired man said. I'm not sure, but I heard that the corpses were rotten. If I remember correctly, the weakest invincible Black Army soldiers guarding the Butterfly Valley was a one-star battle saint. It would take at least 2 to 3 months for the corpses to rot. Based on this, the deputy commander should have died not long after he returned to the Butterfly Valley. It seems that the murderer is most likely Qin Feiyang. The white-clothed young man's eyes flashed. What should we do now? The red-haired man asked. The white-clothed young man waved his hand and said, Don't worry about this. I will arrange it. You just need to investigate the movements of the emperor and the others. Yes. Then I will take my leave. The red-haired man bowed to the white-clothed young man and turned to leave the alchemy room. Qin Feiyang, ever since your bloodline power reverted to its ancestral state, I have been waiting for you to come back. Now you have finally come back. I really want to know what kind of expression you will have when you find out my other identity. The white-clothed young man murmured. Before he could finish his sentence, he disappeared without a trace. 1 day, 3 days, 5 days. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. Thousands of invincible Black Army soldiers had entered the Yan and Pan counties. Because these 2 counties were under the jurisdiction of the spiritual state. The arrival of the invincible Black Army caused the people of these 2 counties to be in a constant state of panic. In the past, they didn't know what the invincible Black Army was. But over the years, the invincible Black Army had been stationed in the imperial capital. 1 person told 10, and 10 told 100, and everyone knew about it. Therefore, when a large number of invincible Black Army soldiers appeared, everyone was in danger. However, Qin Feiyang didn't know about all this, and he didn't want to know. But it didn't mean that he didn't expect it. In fact, he had expected all of this. Because even if Wang Hong didn't report it to the imperial capital, the people in the imperial capital would find out sooner or later. It was just a matter of time. However, even if he expected it, he wasn't worried at all. He would deal with whatever came his way. Some things couldn't be avoided even if you wanted to. The most important thing was that he didn't want to think about these problems now. He just wanted to settle down quietly for a while. Another few days passed. In the morning, as usual, Qin Feiyang woke up from his cultivation early in the morning and sat by the lake to fish quietly. The sun rose, and the golden sunlight spread over the lake. A gentle breeze blew from the mountain stream in the distance, and the lake sparkled. Everything was so quiet and peaceful. Boom. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang sensed from afar that dozens of powerful auras appeared in the sky above the Iron Bull town. Each of these auras contained a terrifying saint aura. They're here. He muttered to himself without any expression on his face. He didn't even look up in the direction of the Iron Bull town. He kept looking at the floating on the lake. In fact, there were no fish in this lake at all. Because when he built this artificial lake, he didn't put any fish in. And he sat by the lake every day fishing, not really fishing but cultivating his body and mind. In other words, he wasn't fishing for fish but for mind. But he knew that he didn't have much time here. Because everyone in the Iron Bull town knew that he used to live here, and the invincible Black Army would definitely not forget to search here. You're really here. Suddenly, a hearty laugh sounded. This voice. Qin Feiyang frowned and looked up. He saw a young man in white appear out of thin air above the lake. Qin Feiyang couldn't be more familiar with that face. It was Lu Xingchen. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, Why are you here? Why can't I be here? Lu Xingchen asked back. He took a step forward and landed beside Qin Feiyang. No. I mean, how did you get out of the imperial city? Qin Feiyang said. One had to know. From the imperial city to the spiritual state, one had to pass through the pagoda. And the pagoda was guarded by Elder Qin. Very few people in the world could sneak into the pagoda in front of Elder Qin. Lu Xingchen laughed. Have you forgotten? My space divine item can move. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. Needless to say, he had really overlooked this point. Indeed, with a space divine item that could move, entering the pagoda was a very simple matter. Then why are you looking for me? How do you know I'm here? Qin Feiyang said. Of course I'm here because I miss you, an old friend. As for why I know you're here, it's actually very easy to judge because you have nowhere else to go in the great Qin Empire. Lu Xingqian smiled faintly. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, and asked again. Then how do you know I'm back? Speculation. But obviously, I guessed right. Lu Xingqian said. Qin Feiyang said. What about the state preceptor and the others? Do they know I'm back? Chapter 1142. Can you be more shameless? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. This was the first time he saw someone praise himself for being smart. Lu Xingqian chuckled and asked, Did you kill the invincible Black Army in Butterfly Valley? Qin Feiyang nodded. You've been to the capital? Lu Xingqian asked again. Qin Feiyang nodded again. Lu Xingqian said angrily. Then why didn't you come to me? Do you still think of me as a friend? When I came back this time, I didn't see anyone except my mother. Qin Feiyang shook his head and then said, Besides, I want to make it clear that I've never thought of you as my friend. I'm sad to hear you say that. Lu Xingqian's face darkened. He knew very well about his relationship with Qin Feiyang, but there was no need to be so straightforward. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, I don't believe that you came all the way here just to see me. You don't have such good intentions. Let's not beat around the bush. You bastard. Well, I did come to see you because I have a few things to tell you. First of all, do you remember Ling Yu, Zhao Yu, Feng Ranran, and Luo Dan? Lu Xingqian asked. Of course. Qin Feiyang nodded. They're missing, Lu Xingqian said. Qin Feiyang turned to look at him in surprise. When you came back last time, they were still there, but when you left, they disappeared with you. I even went to Fengzhou and Yuzhou to investigate them. Do you know what I found? Lu Xingqian said mysteriously. What's the result? Qin Feiyang frowned. Lu Xingqian said, According to my investigation, although these 4 people came from Yuzhou and Fengzhou, there is no information about them in Yuzhou or Fengzhou. Impossible, Qin Feiyang said resolutely. Yuzhou and Fengzhou were the birthplaces of the 4 of them. Moreover, the 4 of them were such monstrous geniuses. How could they not have any information about them? I also felt that this matter was very inconceivable. Thus, I carefully investigated it. In the end, I discovered that they did not have any relatives in Yu Province and Feng Province. Many people don't even know of their existence. After that, I went to Yu Province and Feng Province to investigate. Guess what? They actually entered the sacred palace the day before the 9 underworlds Yellow Springs opened. As for their identities and origins, the Holy Sanctum's records are blank. Lu Xingqian said. So, these 4 people are really mysterious? Qin Feiyang mumbled. Lu Xingqian said, Secondly, I think I saw Zhang Jin in Imperial Capital. Zhang Jin? Qin Feiyang frowned. Why did this name sound so familiar? Don't you remember? He is Zhang Ren's younger brother. He is somewhat related to you. Lu Xingqian said. So it's him. Qin Feiyang suddenly realized. After being reminded by Lu Xingqian, he remembered that Zhang Jin used to work in the resource hall of the Holy Sanctum. His aptitude was mediocre, but his character was not bad. Later, because of Zhang Ren's death, Zhang Jin was thoroughly disappointed in the Holy Sanctum. He carried Zhang Ren's corpse and left the Holy Sanctum. Thinking of Zhang Jin, Qin Feiyang also recalled some past events. He turned to Lu Xingqian and sneered. Do you have any thoughts about Zhang Ren's death? Lu Xingqian smiled bitterly. I still remember that during the temple's great gathering, Zhang Ren had already admitted defeat, but your family member, Lu Ziyuan, still killed him. And you, the representative of the inner sanctum at that time, a proud son of heaven, not only did not deal with it impartially, you even shielded Lu Ziyuan. If not for Zhang Ren's death, Zhang Jin would not have left the Holy Sanctum in a fit of anger. Qin Feiyang mocked. It's all because of the frivolity of the past. Can you not mention it again? I'm also very ashamed and regretful now, Lu Xingqian said bitterly. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it back then? Qin Feiyang shook his head and asked. Now that you see Zhang Jin appear in the imperial capital, do you feel a little flustered? To be honest, I do feel a little. But for him to appear in the imperial capital, there is clearly a problem. After all, whether it is cultivation or talent, he is not qualified to step into the imperial capital. Lu Xingqian said. There is indeed a problem. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, let's talk about other things. Lu Xingqian nodded, and was about to speak. Rumble. Crack. A loud noise suddenly came from Iron Ox Town. The two hurriedly raised their heads and looked in the direction of Iron Ox Town. Their eyes were filled with surprise. The loud noise was incessant, followed by a strong wave of battle. Lu Xingqian said in a low voice. Do you feel it? It's the holy aura. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, it should be the invincible Black Army that is in trouble. But in this small Iron Ox Town, is there anyone who can fight against the invincible Black Army? Let's go and take a look. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He decisively put down the fishing rod and rushed to the sky, flying towards Iron Ox Town. Lu Xingqian followed closely behind. Qin Feiyang suddenly turned his head and looked at Lu Xingqian. He did not notice before, but now he realized that Lu Xingqian's aura also carried a holy aura. 5-star battle saint. Finally, he saw Lu Xingqian's cultivation clearly, but even his jaw almost dropped. How did this person do it? One had to know. He had opened the door of potential and received the inheritance of his ancestor, causing his bloodline to revert to its ancestral state. That was why he could break through to 5-star battle saint so quickly. But Lu Xingqian actually caught up to him? This was too inconceivable. Lu Xingqian seemed to have noticed Qin Feiyang's surprise. He revealed his white teeth and smiled. Didn't I tell you before? I was once a god of war. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Lu Xingqian had indeed said this before, but he did not take it to heart at that time. He thought that Lu Xingqian was just joking. But now, hearing this sentence again, he could not help but hesitate. Could it be true? Lu Xingqian pointed to the sky in front of them and said, don't think about it. Look at the sky above Iron Ox Town. It's very interesting. Qin Feiyang looked up suspiciously, and his eyes suddenly widened. Above Iron Ox Town, a white-clothed youth was crazily slaughtering a group of invincible Black Army soldiers. He was extremely powerful. But this was not the main point. The main point was, that white-clothed youth looked exactly like him. He was practically another Qin Feiyang. Lu Xingqian asked suspiciously, Brother Qin, is he an imposter or are you an imposter? Or are you the one who arranged this? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him and said in a deep voice, how could I arrange for someone to impersonate me? Who is this person? What's his purpose for impersonating me? That's amazing. The cultivation of those invincible Black Army soldiers were between 1-star and 4-star battle saints, but he could easily destroy them. And I can't see through his cultivation. Lu Xingqian said. Qin Feiyang said, judging from his aura, he should be a 6-star battle saint. There's actually a 6-star battle saint hidden in the spiritual state? Lu Xingqian was shocked. Not good. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's expression changed. After such a terrifying battle, Iron Ox Town below would have been destroyed. He quickly looked down at Iron Ox Town. As expected, Iron Ox Town had long disappeared, leaving behind only ruins. And there was not a single living person in the ruins. Corpses were everywhere, and blood stained the ground. Damn it. Qin Feiyang cursed silently, and his speed suddenly increased. After a few breaths, he entered Iron Ox Town, landed on the broken streets, and walked all the way. Everywhere he passed, there were broken corpses and broken limbs, and the smell of blood was pungent. Why did they hurt these innocent people? Qin Feiyang gradually clenched his fists. Although he had only lived in Iron Ox Town for 5 years, he already had deep feelings for the people and things here. Moreover, most of the people living in Iron Ox Town were mortals who had no strength to truss a chicken. It was too much to not even let mortals go. In the end, he stopped in front of a dilapidated house. This was Zhao Shuanger's home. When he passed by this place on his way back, he took a few glances. Everyone had a simple smile on their faces. But now everything was gone, and only ruins were left. Why? He walked in slowly, and corpses could be seen everywhere. Fresh blood flowed on the ground, still steaming. It was like hell, and it was a ghastly sight. Suddenly, he quickened his pace and walked to the front of an old man. The old man had white hair and was lying in a pool of blood. His body was pressed against a beam, and he was already dead. Grandpa Zhao, I'm sorry, I'm late. Qin Feiyang squatted beside the old man, his face full of self-blame and guilt. The old man was Zhao Shuanger's grandfather. Ever since Ling Yunfei, Luo Qingzhu, Zhao Shuanger and Feng Ling died, he did not take care of their families. For example, Ling Yunfei's mother, Lu Ji. For example, Luo Qingzhu's mother, Luo Qianxue, and Feng Ling grandfather. Although Feng Ling grandfather had died, he still remembered him in his heart. Only this old man, he had almost forgotten about him. In the past, he did not think much of it. But at this moment, when he looked at the old man's eyes and the bloody corpse, he could not help but feel regret in his heart. Why did he not think of this before? He only felt regret after losing it. Qin Feiyang slowly reached out his hand, closed the old man's eyes, and raised his head to look at the man in white and the invincible black army. Today, none of you can leave. He suddenly roared and rushed to the sky with the billowing holy aura. Why is there Qin Feiyang here? The invincible black army, who was fighting with the man in white, had a trace of surprise in their eyes. At the same time, the man in white also looked at Qin Feiyang. He was not surprised at all. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Then he turned around and flew away with lightning speed. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and a red sword energy surged out. 40 sword energies soared into the sky, and the few remaining invincible black army were wiped out. Blood dyed the sky. Boom. Then he pointed his index finger in the air, and a beam of battle energy blasted into the Iron Ox town below. With a loud rumble, the entire Iron Ox town collapsed into the ground and turned into a giant tomb. I will bring his head back and bury it with you. Rest in peace, Qin Feiyang whispered. Then he used the phantom steps and chased after the man in white. Wait for me. Chapter 1143. In the void, the man in white took a mysterious step, moving as fast as lightning. Although he seemed to be running for his life, if one looked carefully, they would find that there was not the slightest bit of panic on his face. Qin Feiyang followed closely behind. Lu Xingqian whispered, Brother Qin, he is a 6-star battle saint. His cultivation is 1 realm higher than ours, and he has mastered a perfect auxiliary battle art. I'm afraid we won't be able to catch up to him. So what if he's 1 realm higher? Qin Feiyang smiled coldly, activated the concealment art, and disappeared without a trace. Lu Xingqian was surprised. What was this guy doing in the castle? Could it be that the castle could also move? He did not know that Qin Feiyang had already mastered a battle art that could make him invisible. He only thought that Qin Feiyang had gone to the castle. At the same time, sensing that Qin Feiyang's aura had disappeared, the man in white also stopped and turned his head to look behind him suspiciously. But just as he turned his head, he felt a pain in his lower abdomen. He suddenly looked down and his expression changed. He saw a battle aura, like a sharp arrow, entering his lower abdomen at lightning speed. Blood immediately flowed out. What's going on? The man in white was bewildered. Lu Xingqian was bewildered. It was also at this moment that Qin Feiyang appeared, and stood right in front of the white-clothed man. He was very close to him. Impossible. Your castle can't be moved at all. How did you do it? The man in white was shocked and angry. Qin Feiyang did not answer. He grabbed the man in white's neck and sneered. I want to see who exactly you are. How dare you pretend to be me, Qin Feiyang? After saying that, Qin Feiyang took out a facial restoration pill and stuffed it into the man in white's mouth. The man in white's face was suddenly filled with panic. Boom. But at this moment, in the forest below, a terrifying emperor aura emerged and instantly enveloped Qin Feiyang. At the same time that Qin Feiyang was imprisoned, a white light flashed out from the forest below and landed in front of Qin Feiyang like lightning. He grabbed the man in white and retreated. There's still someone else. And it's a war king. Qin Feiyang's eyebrows raised. His aura, his black hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. He forcibly broke through the emperor pressure that was imprisoning him. Then, He looked at the white off her face, but Qin Feiyang's eyes narrowed. He felt like he had seen this pair of eyes before, but he couldn't remember where. The woman in white spoke. Her voice was bone-chilling and emotionless. She was like a god of death. Then, she took Zhang Jin and left without looking back. Even the voice is familiar, Qin Feiyang muttered. With a thought, Yan Wei appeared out of thin air and said in a deep voice, "Take them down." "Yes," Yan Wei responded with a respectful tone, as a powerful battle chi burst out from his body and sprang toward the white-shirted woman and her companion like a surging tide. "There is indeed a war king hiding beside me." The woman in white's pupils shrank. She raised her slender arm and waved it in the air. Battle chi emerged and turned into a huge wave that swept across the sky. Boom! The two waves of battle chi collided. Puff! Yan Wei's body trembled and he retreated. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The woman in white's body was also trembling slightly. "A mere one-star war king dares to behave atrociously in front of us. You really don't know what's good for you." Yan Wei's eyes turned cold. He executed the Heavenly Demon's 9 steps and charged towards the woman in white. The Heavenly Demon's 9 steps was not only a perfect support skill, it was also a perfect killing skill. In other words, this was a skill that was both offensive and defensive. With every step he took, his aura would increase tremendously. Even the air was trembling. At this moment, he was like a demon god descending to the world. His aura was extremely powerful. When he took the 4th step, both his speed and his aura had reached an unprecedented level. Boom! When he took the 5th step, he was like a god descending to the mortal world. He stepped on the woman in white's head. Immediately, a terrifying murderous aura enveloped the woman in white. Perfect battle skill. The woman in white's heart trembled. No matter what kind of battle skill it was a peak perfect battle skill. Boom! Whoosh! The woman in white waved her hand. Battle chi emerged and turned into a huge wave that surged forward. This battle skill. Qin Feiyang, who was not far away, looked at the huge wave that covered the sky and the earth. His brows were tightly knitted together. The battle skill that the woman in white used was only a superior battle skill. However, it gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Boom! Yan Wei's aura shook the heavens and the earth. Looking at the huge wave, his eyes were extremely sharp. Immediately, he took the 6th step. Accompanied by a deafening loud sound, the huge wave instantly disintegrated. He was unstoppable. Puff! The woman in white spat out a mouthful of blood. However, her eyes became colder and colder. Waterlong sky. She let go of the man in white and roared. Her long hair danced wildly in the air. It was as if a female demon had appeared. Her murderous aura was monstrous. Boom! Battle chi poured out like a waterfall. Huge waves that covered the sky surged in the void above. It was as if this place had turned into a vast ocean. The destructive aura swept in all directions. Waterlong sky. This is the second move of the sunflower water art. Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled. The memories that had been sealed in his mind for a long time gushed out uncontrollably. How is this possible? It's actually her. His face was filled with disbelief. Humph! At the same time, Yan Wei snorted coldly. He simply and violently stomped his foot. This was the 7th step. Boom! This stomp was earth-shattering. The void distorted crazily as if it was about to crack. Several huge peaks nearby collapsed in an instant. Dust and smoke billowed and the rumbling was deafening. As for the huge wave, it was like a broken mirror. It cracked bit by bit until it finally disintegrated and dissipated between heaven and earth. Puff! The woman in white was sent flying. Blood gushed out of her mouth. Yan Wei also retreated a few steps. However, he only suffered a slight injury. After stabilizing his body, he immediately charged towards the woman in white. His aura was surging. Lu Xingchen's pupils contracted as he landed beside Qin Feiyang in a single step and said in a low voice, "This subordinate of yours is very strong." Qin Feiyang turned a deaf ear. His gaze was fixed on the woman in white. He said to Yan Wei, "I want her alive." Alive? Yan Wei was stunned. Looking at Qin Feiyang's expression, He wondered if this woman was an enemy of Qin Feiyang's in the past. Understood. He nodded slightly. His hand reached out, and his battle chi turned into a huge wave that surged into the sky. Boom. In the blink of an eye, a huge hand that covered the sky appeared and grabbed towards the woman in white. "You're too naive if you want to capture me like this." The woman in white sneered. She waved her hands and waves of battle chi surged into the sky. Roar. In the blink of an eye, a water dragon that was hundreds of feet long appeared. Its ferocity was unparalleled. Qin Feiyang's eyes shone brightly. He mumbled, "This is the third move of the sunflower water art, water dragon breaking the sky." Sunflower water art? Lu Xingqian was stunned. His face was filled with surprise. He stared at the woman in white and mumbled, "The sunflower water art is not her battle art. Could she be?" "That's right. If it's not a coincidence, then she must be the woman we know," Qin Feiyang said. The water dragon roared in the sky and pounced towards the huge hand. The huge hand that Yan Wei condensed was just a normal attack. The water dragon breaking the sky that the woman in white used was a superior battle art. Yan Wei was naturally no match for her. With a boom, the huge hand was destroyed on the spot. However, at the same time that the huge hand was destroyed, Yan Wei took the 8th step of the 9 steps of the heavenly demon. His aura was close to that of a 5-star combat emperor. The water dragon immediately shattered into pieces and turned into bubbles. "Stop struggling. When I take the 9th step, you will definitely die." Yan Wei looked down at the woman in white like a king. His divine aura was inviolable. "Then come and try." The woman in white placed her hands in front of her chest and quickly formed a seal. A destructive aura spread out. Stubborn. Yan Wei's gaze turned cold, and he suddenly took the 9th step. His aura broke through the barrier and charged towards a 5-star combat emperor. The power of the 9 steps of the heavenly demon had been unleashed to the extreme. However, just as the woman in white was about to lose her life under his feet, she suddenly raised her head and a strong murderous intent burst out from her eyes. At the same time, a palm-sized mystic ice seal appeared between her hands and cold air billowed. The first style of the frost arts, ice seal. Although she shouted, the mystic ice seal broke through the air and swept into Yan Wei's feet. Yan Wei's expression changed immediately. He could clearly feel that when the mystic ice seal entered his feet, a shocking cold current suddenly swept through his entire body. His limbs began to stiffen. White snowflakes quickly appeared on his clothes, skin, and even his hair. These snowflakes emitted a terrifying cold air. In the blink of an eye, a thick layer of ice formed on his body, and he became a human ice sculpture. Frost arts. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Yan Wei and the woman in white had the same cultivation, but she was able to seal Yan Wei in ice? This was enough to prove that this so-called frost arts was also a perfect battle art, and it was also a peak perfect battle art. The woman in white looked at Yan Wei with disdain and turned to Qin Feiyang saying, "I believe you have already guessed who I am." "Dongqing," Qin Feiyang said. The woman in white sneered. "That's right, it's me. Are you surprised?" Qin Feiyang was silent. Lu Xingqian looked at Qin Feiyang and asked Dongqing, "Where have you been all these years?" "Hee. Haha," Dongqing laughed crazily. She took off her mask and revealed a face as beautiful as a flower. Dongqing was once the pride of the inner palace. Her appearance was not bad, and it was not an exaggeration to say that she was peerless. But right now, her face was filled with hostility and hatred. She looked at Lu Xingqian and said, "I went to hell, but I was not satisfied, so I came back from hell." Chapter 1144. I'm afraid you don't have the ability. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Back then he wasn't afraid of Dongqing, and now, he was even more afraid. However, Dongqing's current cultivation made it hard for him to accept. He clearly remembered that Dongqing had only broken through to the 6-star War Emperor when they fought in the temple's great gathering. At that time, his cultivation had also broken through to the 3-star War Emperor. All these years he relied on the Gate of Potential and the purple gold dragon blood to barely break through to the 5-star War Saint. But Dongqing had already stepped into the 1-star War Emperor realm. He wouldn't believe that Dongqing's talent was better than his, because he knew how Dongqing's talent was. But how did she do it? Even if she opened all the gates of potential, it couldn't be so fast. Lu Xingqin's breakthrough to the 5-star war saint had already shocked him, but now Dongqing's cultivation was even more unbelievable. You're no longer the Qin Feiyang from back then, and I'm no longer the Dongqing from back then. It's still hard to say who will win now. Get ready to pay your debt. Dongqing smiled coldly, and her hands began to form seals again. A destructive aura rolled out from between her hands. Boom. However, at this time, an even more terrifying aura erupted. Qin Feiyang, Lu Xingqin, and the white-clothed woman all turned to look at Yin Wei. The aura came from Yin Wei, who was trapped in the ice sculpture. What's going on? The white-clothed woman was bewildered. Rumble. Yin Wei's aura became stronger and stronger, surging in all directions with earth-shattering momentum. The void and earth here began to tremble. Boom. Suddenly, the aura that erupted from Yin Wei actually broke through the shackles of the 1-star War Master and climbed to the 2-star War Master. He actually broke through at this time? The white-clothed woman and her companion were dumbfounded. Gotcha. Suddenly, a crack appeared on the ice sculpture. As soon as this crack appeared, a chain reaction occurred, and tear marks continued to appear. In less than 3 breaths, the entire ice sculpture was full of cracks, as if it was covered with a layer of spider web. Not good. The white-clothed woman's expression changed. She turned around and dived in front of the white-clothed man. She grabbed the white-clothed man, opened a teleportation door, and entered it without looking back. Qin Feiyang, if you want to know why we're pretending to be you, then come to the ruins. The portal quickly disappeared. Dongqing's voice echoed in the air for a long time. From the beginning to the end, Qin Feiyang didn't try to stop Dongqing, because he couldn't stop her now. Land of ruins. His eyes flashed slightly, and then he looked at Yin Wei again. Crack. Finally, Yin Wei broke out of the ice, his aura shaking the clouds. Congratulations. Qin Feiyang smiled. The stronger Yin Wei was, the more help it would be to him. Yin Wei rubbed his head and smiled innocently. He said apologetically, I'm sorry. I was too careless and couldn't make them stay. I'm fine. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and his eyes flickered. Lu Xingqin frowned. Brother Qin, why did Dongqing ask you to go to the ruins? What kind of place is the ruins? Yin Wei didn't understand. Qin Feiyang said, the ruins is a place where not even a blade of grass grows. It's also a place of no return. A place of no return. Yin Wei's eyes trembled and he said in surprise, isn't that a place of death? Qin Feiyang nodded. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a place of death, but it's not a problem for me. I've been there twice, but I can't figure out why they want to lead me to the ruins. Lu Xingqin asked in surprise, could it be that there are still secrets hidden in the ruins? Secret? Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly. No matter what the secret is, I have to go and see it. No. Dongqing and the others clearly came prepared. If you go now, won't you fall into their trap? I think it's better to take the long view, Lu Xingqin advised. We can't guess what their purpose is. Only by going to the ruins can we find out the truth. As for you, there's no need to take the risk with me. Go back to the imperial capital to avoid being discovered and arousing suspicion. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Xingqin and said. Lu Xingqin pondered for a moment and nodded with a smile. Well, take care of yourself. When you come to the imperial capital next time, remember to come and find me. Let's go to the fragrant moon brothel for a few drinks. Qin Feiyang nodded. Goodbye. Lu Xingqin cupped his hands and said. Then he nodded and smiled at Yin Wei. He opened the portal and walked in. After Lu Xingqin left, Yin Wei whispered. This Lu Xingqin is not simple. You'd better be careful. Qin Feiyang was surprised and asked curiously. How is he not simple? Yin Wei shook his head. I can't say. It's just a feeling. Every time I look at him, I always feel like he's covered with a veil. He's unfathomable. You're right. Although I've known him for many years, I still can't see through him. Moreover, he's related to the Mu family of the Forgotten Continent. Qin Feiyang said. What? Yan Wei was stunned. What kind of existence is the Mu family? They're actually related to the Mu family? After a few months of recuperation, it's time to stretch my muscles. The ruins. I'd like to see what's waiting for me. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly. He opened a portal and stepped into it. Yan Wei took a deep breath and followed. Whoosh. Whoosh. The ruins. In the canyon, the wind was still howling, and the black tornado was roaring wantonly. The iron chain bridge above the canyon was rusty and swaying in the wind. No one knew how long it had been there. Whoosh. As soon as Qin Feiyang appeared, he glanced at the iron chain bridge. He saw a man and a woman standing on the opposite side of the iron chain bridge. It was Dongqing. They've already gone over. Yan Wei whispered. He looked at the storm in the canyon and frowned. That black storm actually gave him a great sense of danger. Go down. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and landed on the bridge. Then, without any hesitation, he stepped on the iron chain bridge. Yan Wei followed closely behind him, not daring to be the least bit distracted. The wind was howling, and the iron chain bridge kept swaying. It was like the sound of the Grim Reaper. Yan Wei looked down and frowned. What's under the canyon? Everything. People, beasts, jungles, glaciers, deserts, seas of fire, and so on. It's like an underground world. Qin Feiyang said. Yan Wei was surprised. It can't be. Even I don't dare to touch these black tornadoes. How did they survive? Qin Feiyang said. There's no storm under the canyon. I see. Yan Wei nodded. After a while, the two walked to the middle of the iron chain bridge. Standing there, they could clearly see Dongqing and Yan Wei. The two stood side by side on the opposite side, looking at Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei with cold eyes. Suddenly, Dongqing waved her hand, and a red sword appeared out of thin air. And Yan Wei was stunned and quickly shouted, "What do you want to do?" "Send you to hell." Dongqing smiled coldly. She grabbed the red sword and slashed at the iron chain. Damn it. Yan Wei's face changed greatly. Don't panic. Although this iron chain bridge is rusty, it's very strong. Not to mention ordinary sharp weapons. I'm afraid even a sacred weapon may not be able to cut it. Qin Feiyang said. Hearing this, Yan Wei couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But as soon as he finished speaking, Dongqing's sword slashed at the iron chain, and a loud clanging sound rang out. Sparks flew in all directions, and the iron chain was actually cut apart. What? Qin Feiyang turned pale with fright. What level of sword was that? It was so sharp? But there was no time to look carefully. The iron chain broke, and the iron chain bridge shook violently. Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei, who were standing on the bridge, suddenly lost their balance. However, the two of them were quick with their hands, and quickly grabbed the other side of the iron chain to stabilize their bodies. How is it? Are you desperate now? Dongqing grabbed the sword and looked at Qin Feiyang with sarcasm in her eyes. Desperate? Even if you cut off all the iron chains, you won't be a threat to me. Qin Feiyang's face was full of disdain. Then let's have a try. Dongqing's eyes flashed. She raised the sword in her hand and slashed down with all her strength. Clang! In a burst of fire, all the iron chains were broken in an instant. The iron chain bridge immediately descended towards the canyon below, and the gravity that permeated the air above the canyon immediately surged towards the two of them. His life was hanging by a thread. Yan Wei couldn't help but panic. Grab me! Qin Feiyang shouted without looking back. He was calm and steady. Yan Wei quivered and immediately reached out to grab Qin Feiyang's shoulder. At the same time, Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and a rib appeared. When the originally dim rib bone came into contact with the surging gravity, it immediately blossomed with resplendent divine light. In an instant, the gravity disappeared. The black hurricane was also isolated by the divine light. Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei stood in the sky above the canyon. The divine bone shone brightly like a full moon, shining in all directions. Dongqing frowned. But suddenly, she smiled again and gave Qin Feiyang a thumbs up from afar. She said, impressive. It seems like this is what you rely on to enter the ruins repeatedly. However, the real show is yet to come. If you have the ability, continue to chase after me. After that, She waved her hand and took the man in white to the depths of the ruins like lightning. The real show. Don't let me down. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself and shouted, "Let's go." Yanwei nodded and swept up Qin Feiyang. They turned into a ray of light and flew to the other side. This woman must be brewing some conspiracy. We must be careful. In front of absolute strength, no matter what conspiracy, it is like withered branches and withered leaves. It will be annihilated with a snap of the fingers. Qin Feiyang said. Yanwei had already broken through to a 2-star combat emperor. In addition, he had 2 perfect battle arts. It was more than enough to deal with Dongqing. As for the red battle sword in Dongqing's hand, even if it was a divine weapon, he was not afraid. Because he also had a divine weapon. This divine weapon was Chang Shui. Chapter 1145. Entering the ruins, Qin Feiyang put away the ribs and looked back at the canyon. Without the iron chain bridge, the ruins would become a real cage in the future. No one would be able to enter, and no one would be able to leave. However, since Dongqing dared to cut off the iron chain bridge, she should have some confidence. But what was her confidence? Was it the battle sword in her hand? Whoosh. The two moved as fast as lightning. Soon, Qin Feiyang saw a village. Qin Feiyang had a deep impression of this village. Because when he first entered the ruins, he came here and gave the villagers a lot of food. One of the children, in order to thank him, gave him a bamboo tube. However, the water in the bamboo tube was poisonous. But at that time, Qin Feiyang did not pursue it. Because he couldn't bear it. But at this moment, corpses were everywhere. Blood flowed on the ground, soaking the mountains and rivers. What's going on? Yanwei was surprised. Qin Feiyang walked to a corpse, looked at it seriously, and said in a deep voice, "It died not long ago. It should be killed by Dongqing." Why did they do that? What's the benefit of killing these innocent people? Yanwei said angrily. I don't know. However, for these people, death may be the best relief. Qin Feiyang sighed. At that time, if it weren't for the old man's permission, he would have destroyed this place full of darkness and cruelty. Yanwei glanced at the desolate land and fell silent. Indeed, it was better to die than to live in such a place. Let's go, Qin Feiyang said. Yanwei calmed down, looked ahead and frowned. They have disappeared. How can we catch up? Qin Feiyang waved his hand and called out, Wolf King, lead the way. Wolf King sniffed hard and said, straight ahead. Yanwei immediately rushed forward with a man and a wolf. Stop. But not long after, Wolf King suddenly shouted again. What happened? Yanwei stopped in the void of space and looked at it suspiciously. Wolf King said, something's wrong. There's the smell of blood in the air on both the left and right. It can't be? Qin Feiyang and Yanwei looked at each other in bewilderment. Absolutely. Wolf King said with certainty. Yanwei asked, did they split up? Something's wrong. Their scent is indeed heading straight ahead. Wolf King said. Yanwei said. If they went straight ahead, then where did the bloody smell on the left and right come from? I don't understand either. Wolf King shook his head. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He looked at Yanwei and said, let's split up and take a look. We'll meet here later. Okay. Yanwei nodded, turned around, and quickly disappeared to the left. Qin Feiyang and Wolf King rushed to the right. 100 breaths later, another village came into the sight of a man and a wolf, but the ground was also full of floating corpses, and the ground was dyed dark red. The strong smell of blood was nauseating. Wolf King ran to a corpse, only to see a fatal wound on the throat of the corpse. But the blood had solidified. Obviously, the corpse had been dead for a long time. It looked up at the other corpses and found that the time of death and the fatal wound were exactly the same as the corpse in front of it. How could this be? Wolf King muttered to himself and returned to Qin Feiyang's side, saying, these people's faces are twisted and ferocious, and there's still fear in their eyes before they died. They should have seen something terrible when they were alive, and have been dead for a long time. It shouldn't be Dongqing's doing. If it's not Dongqing, who could it be? Qin Feiyang's brows were tightly knitted. I've carefully smelled the residual smell here, but the smell of blood here is too strong. and I can't catch the scent of the murderer. But there's still a smell of blood in the air ahead. Wolf King said in a deep voice. Lead the way, Qin Feiyang said. Wolf King immediately ran forward. After a while, they saw another village, with hundreds of corpses lying on the ground. There was a fatal wound on the throat, and the blood had solidified and seeped into the ground. Qin Feiyang clenched his hands, turned to look at Wolf King and asked, Still can't catch the scent of the murderer? Wolf King shook his head. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with killing intent, and with a wave of his hand, the ground was suddenly torn apart, and the whole village was buried under the ground. Then he said, Let's go and meet up with Yin Wei. After a while, Qin Feiyang and Yin Wei met up. Qin Feiyang asked, How's the situation? I've found a total of 6 villages, but all the people in the villages are dead, and no one is alive. I suspect that the people here should have been killed. Yin Wei said. The Wolf King asked, Then do they all have a fatal wound on their throats? That's right. According to my observation, they all died from blood loss. Yin Wei nodded. Wolf King said, How long have they been dead? Yin Wei thought for a moment and said, The blood has solidified, it should be 2 or 3 days ago. Wolf King said, We saw the same situation as you. Damn bastard, who is so cruel? Yin Wei was furious. Generally speaking, people with the cultivation of him and Qin Feiyang, even if all the people in the ruins were killed, they would not blink an eye. It was not that they were indifferent, but that they had long been used to it. Moreover, their hands were stained with blood, so they were not qualified to scold others. But the people here were all bleeding to death because their throats were cut. This was obviously intentional. For an ordinary person, death was not terrible. After all, they only had a short lifespan of a few decades. But such a way of dying was torture. If this person is not crazy, then there must be some purpose. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. Yin Wei said with hatred, What purpose can there be? He must have gone crazy. Qin Feiyang said, We can't judge too early. Let's continue to track. Yin Wei nodded, and led Wolf King and Qin Feiyang, turned into a stream of light, and exposed themselves in front. On the way, they did not encounter many villages, but without exception, all of them had suffered misfortune. Along the way, they did not find a single survivor. Time passed breath by breath. Half an hour later, a dilapidated ancient city in the distance entered the sight of 2 people and 1 wolf. On the city gate, there were 3 ancient words engraved. Wohu City. Wolf King said, We're back again. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. When they first came to the ruins, they also came to Wohu City and made a big scene in the city. But now Wohu City was even more dilapidated than before. As far as the eye could see, the city walls were full of holes. The buildings in the city were also dilapidated. Coupled with the dim sky, from afar, it looked like a gloomy ghost city. There was no one guarding the city gate, and it looked incomparably deserted. I really didn't expect that such a backward place would exist in the prosperous and glorious Great Qin Empire. Yin Wei took a deep look, turned to Qin Feiyang, and asked, How long has this place existed? According to the ancient records, the ruins already existed at the beginning of the Great Qin Empire. So the ruins should be left behind by the previous dynasty, Heavenly Sun Empire. It has been at least 10,000 years since then. Qin Feiyang said. So long? Yin Wei frowned and said, The people living here are really pitiful. Not necessarily. Many people here used to be subjects of the 9 states and 18 counties, but because they committed many evil deeds, they were hunted down and had nowhere to go, so they fled here. Only those who were born here are really pitiful, Wolf King said. Yin Wei looked at Qin Feiyang and said, I really don't understand why the emperors of the Great Qin Empire would allow such a place to exist for so many years. I used to be very puzzled, but when I met a person, I realized that there were many powerful saint beasts sealed here. Unless it was a last resort, the ruins should not be destroyed. Qin Feiyang said. This person was naturally referring to Ren Duxing. Who is it? Yin Wei said. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. It's a long story. We might meet him this time. When we meet, I'll introduce him to you. Okay. Yin Wei nodded. While talking, The 2 men and 1 wolf were getting closer and closer to Wohu City. Suddenly, Wolf King's pupils shrank and he exclaimed, "There's the smell of blood." The smell of blood. Could it be that the people of Wohu City have also met with misfortune? Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei looked at each other and immediately sped up. What a strong smell of blood! The closer they got, the heavier Wolf King's gaze became. Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei also smelled the smell of blood. More than 10 breaths later, they finally landed on the city wall and scanned the scene in the city. Their eyes were filled with shock. The entire Wohu City was littered with corpses. There was not a single person. Blood flowed on the ground like a stream. The bloody scene was like an azure hell. It was terrifying. Yan Wei said, "The blood hasn't coagulated yet. It should be Dongqing's doing." Why? Why would she do that? Qin Feiyang clenched his hands tightly together. Wolf King's eyes suddenly trembled, and he said in surprise, "No, didn't you notice a very serious problem?" "What problem?" The two looked at her in surprise. Old Yan is now a 2-star battle ancestor, 1 small realm higher than Dongqing. And although Dongqing has mastered a perfect auxiliary battle art, Old Yan is also using the Demon 9 steps to bring us along. Moreover, it will take her time to kill these people. Logically speaking, we should have caught up with her long ago. But until now we haven't even seen her shadow. Wolf King said. That's right. Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei suddenly came to a realization. What was going on? Yan Wei seemed to have thought of something. His body trembled slightly, and he said, "Could it be that she has mastered a divine art?" Divine art? Qin Feiyang and Wolf King's eyes narrowed. Wolf King shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be. The divine art is not a cabbage. How could she have it? I would rather believe that she had hidden her cultivation before. It seems that we can't underestimate this woman." Qin Feiyang's face was gloomy. Chapter 1146. Let's go! Wolf King shouted. Today, no matter what, they must find Dongqing and get rid of her. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. On the following journey, the 2 men and 1 wolf did not delay at all. Even if they encountered towns and villages that were massacred, they did not stop at all. At noon, they finally arrived at the royal city in the land of ruins. However, the originally bustling royal city was dead silent at this moment. Millions of corpses were lying in the city. Blood dyed the land within a radius of hundreds of miles. In the void, a bloody mist filled the air, and the smell of blood was pungent. And the way they died was the same as the people in other places. Their throats were cut. Those pairs of eyes were wide open, full of fear and despair. "You animals, get out of here!" Yan Wei roared. There were many people who had died in his hands, but he had never tortured anyone like Dongqing. Qin Feiyang and Wolf King's eyes were gloomy to the extreme. They stood at a commanding height and had a panoramic view of the entire royal city, but except for the corpses on the ground, they did not see anyone else. There was no trace of Dongqing and the man in white. Qin Feiyang looked down at Wolf King and asked, "Are you sure they came to the royal city?" "I'm sure." Wolf King nodded. Qin Feiyang glanced at the royal city and said gloomily, "Then they must be hiding somewhere?" While speaking, with a thought, Lu Hong and the others appeared one after another. Looking at the bloody purgatory-like scene in front of them, everyone's face could not help but turn pale. Qin Feiyang shouted, "Find them, even if you turn the land of ruins upside down. Find them for me." Understood. Lu Hong nodded. Everyone immediately scattered in all directions. But suddenly, Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly said, "Wait." "What?" Everyone stopped and looked back at him suspiciously. "Dongqing hates me to the bone. If she is really hiding in the dark, she will definitely not let you go. Viper and Dan Wangkai stay here. The rest go to the castle." Qin Feiyang said. "All right." Lu Hong, Fatso, and the double-winged snow eagle looked at each other and returned to Qin Feiyang helplessly. Although they all wanted to help, they had no choice. Qin Feiyang was telling the truth. Once they split up and were ambushed by Dongqing, given their cultivation bases, they would be dead for sure. Death was not a big deal. What worried him the most was that Dongqing would use them to threaten Qin Feiyang instead of killing them. In this way, they wouldn't be helping Qin Feiyang, they would be dragging him down. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent everyone to the castle. Then he looked at Yan Wei, Dan Wangkai, and Viper and reminded them, "Be careful." Then he raised his arm and pointed his index finger in the air. Battle qi gushed out and condensed into Dongqing's illusory figure. Because Dan Wangkai and Viper had been in the castle, they did not know what Dongqing looked like. After remembering Dongqing's appearance, Dan Wangkai and Viper and Yanwei turned around and each went in a direction, starting a carpet search. Yanwei did not say anything. A 2-star combat emperor was enough to protect himself. Dan Wangkai was now a 1-star combat emperor, so protecting himself was not a problem. As for Viper, although he was still a 9-star combat saint, he had mastered all kinds of perfect occupation and forbidden techniques. It was no exaggeration to say that he had the ability to kill a 1-star combat emperor. So, even if Dongqing hit her cultivation base or mastered a divine art, it would not be a problem to delay for a while. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and looked at Wolf King, frowning. "Can you smell them now?" "There is no other way." Wolf King shook his head. This place was full of the smell of blood. Even if Dongqing stood behind it, it would not be able to smell Dongqing. "Let's go look for them too," Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. Time passed by bit. About an hour later, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King returned to the center of Monarch City. But Yanwei and the other two had not returned yet. They waited quietly. Another hour passed. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air. The three of them returned one after another. "How is it?" Qin Feiyang asked. "I didn't find anything." Yanwei shook his head. "Me too," Dan Wangkai said. "Same." Viper followed. Wolf King immediately flew into a rage and roared. "I don't believe that they will disappear from the face of the earth." Qin Feiyang glanced at it, lowered his head and fell into deep thought. Suddenly, his face was full of surprise as he looked at Wolf King and said, "Did they go to the canyon below?" Wolf King said, "There are storms all around the canyon. How did they go down?" Qin Feiyang thought. Since Dongqing dared to cut off the iron chain bridge, it means that she must have something to rely on. Suddenly, a firm light flashed in his eyes and he said, "Let's go to the canyon to take a look." "Feiyang? Why are you here?" However, just as Qin Feiyang and the others were about to leave for the canyon, a strange voice sounded in the sky. "Who is it?" Yanwei and the other two immediately looked up, looking extremely vigilant. This voice. Qin Feiyang and Wolf King were stunned, and a trace of joy climbed up their faces as they quickly looked up. Immediately, they saw a middle-aged man standing in the sky. The middle-aged man was about 1.8 meters tall, neither fat nor thin, wearing a black robe, and his face was weather-beaten. White hair could be clearly seen on his temples, full of vicissitudes of life. And the most eye-catching thing was between the middle-aged man's eyebrows. There was a crescent-shaped mark between his eyebrows. "Uncle Ren," Qin Feiyang affectionately called out. "That's right." This man was Ren Wushuang's father, Ren Duxing. Swish. Ren Duxing glanced at Yanwei and the other two, and with a flash, landed in front of Qin Feiyang and Wolf King, and said with a smile, "Long time no see." Wolf King laughed. "It has been a long time, how is it? Did you miss us?" "Of course." Ren Duxing rubbed Wolf King's head lovingly. "Young master he is?" At this time, Viper and the other two walked over, and looked at Ren Duxing suspiciously. "Young master?" Hearing how Viper addressed Qin Feiyang, Ren Duxing was also quite surprised. Qin Feiyang waved at Viper and the other two and smiled. Come, let me introduce you. This is Ren Duxing, a very amazing person." Viper and the other two were stunned, and the curiosity in their eyes was even stronger. They all knew what kind of person Qin Feiyang was. Ordinary people could not enter his eyes at all. However, at this moment, he actually said that the person in front of them was a very amazing person. And his words were full of respect, which was a bit unbelievable. At the same time, hearing Qin Feiyang's introduction, Ren Duxing smiled helplessly, looked at Qin Feiyang and shook his head. What amazing person, it's not as exaggerated as you said. Exaggerated? I have never admired anyone in my life, except for Uncle Run. Qin Feiyang said. The more you say, the more ridiculous it is. Ren Duxing rolled his eyes and said. Aren't you going to introduce them? Qin Feiyang patted his head and smiled. Look at my brain, I forgot when I was happy. Uncle Run, they are all friends I made in Forgotten Continent. Nice to meet you three. Ren Duxing cupped his hands and smiled. Nice to meet you. Viper and the other two also cupped their hands and returned the greeting with smiles on their faces. However, what made them so happy was not because they got to know Ren Duxing. It was because when Qin Feiyang introduced them to Ren Duxing, he called them friends. Although it was just a title, they felt very comfortable in their hearts. Because this meant that Qin Feiyang did not treat them as subordinates. After a simple greeting, Ren Duxing frowned and glanced at the corpses in Royal City. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Feiyang, Uncle Ren knows that you have long had the idea of destroying the ruins, but isn't it too cruel for you to do this? Qin Feiyang and the others were stunned. Wait, you don't think that we killed these people, do you? Wolf King said. Who else here besides you? Ren Duxing asked. Faced with Ren Duxing's question, Wolf King was speechless for a moment, because if it was him, he would also have the same suspicion. After all, they were the only ones here. Qin Feiyang sighed. Uncle Run, these people were not killed by us. No. Ren Duxing frowned and said. Then who was it? Dongqing. Qin Feiyang said. Dongqing? Ren Duxing was slightly stunned and said in surprise. Are you talking about the little girl of the Dong family? That's her. Qin Feiyang nodded. How is this possible? Although I left the city a long time ago, I have seen her when she was a child. With my understanding of her, it should be impossible for her to do such a thing. Ren Duxing found it a little hard to accept. People change. In short, now she has lost her mind. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with killing intent. Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not show any sign of lying, Ren Duxing's face darkened slightly and asked, What the hell is going on? Quick, tell me the details. Qin Feiyang nodded. He told her everything that had happened in Iron Bull Town and the ruins. After listening, Ren Duxing sighed incessantly. He shook his head and sighed. I really didn't expect that the innocent and lively little girl back then would actually turn into such a person. It's really as the saying goes. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. After saying that, Ren Duxing asked again. What about the old man and Shuang? Are they all right now? Qin Feiyang hesitated and said. The old man also went to the imperial capital. Everything is fine for now. For now? Ren Duxing was stunned. He frowned and asked, Did something happen? Qin Feiyang lowered his head and hesitated. Ren Duxing said with a smile. You don't have to worry about anything, tell me the truth. All right. Actually, I am the son of the current emperor. Because of me, the old man and my sister were somewhat implicated, but it has been solved now. Qin Feiyang said truthfully, his face full of self-blame. The son of the current emperor? Ren Duxing looked at Qin Feiyang with a dumbfounded expression. Qin Feiyang nodded, then smiled bitterly and said, But for some reason, not only have I broken away from the relationship of father and son, but also to the point where you die and I die. In short, since I entered the imperial capital, a lot of things have happened, and I can't finish it in a short time. Ren Duxing patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile. Although I don't know what you have experienced all these years, I firmly believe that there is no obstacle in this world that cannot be overcome. I believe it too. Chapter 1147. Ren Duxing smiled and said. So this time you entered the ruins mainly to chase after Dongqing and the person who impersonated you? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked suspiciously, Why did Uncle Ren come to Tortoise City? I also smelled the blood, so I came up to have a look. But I didn't expect that such a cruel thing would happen. Ren Duxing said. He hated evil as if it were his enemy. Yanwei said. It's the first time I've seen such a cruel person in my life. But I don't know where they are hiding now. Qin Feiyang suddenly thought of something. He looked at Ren Duxing and asked, Uncle Ren, have you been in the canyon below all the time? Yes. Ren Duxing nodded. Qin Feiyang said, Then did you see them enter the canyon? No. Ren Duxing shook his head and said, But with the source of power, I should be able to sense their aura. You can sense it? Qin Feiyang and the others were stunned and then overjoyed. Wait a moment. Ren Duxing said and closed his eyes. Qin Feiyang and the others could clearly sense that an obscure force, with Ren Duxing as the center, was spreading in all directions. Time passed breath by breath. About 100 breaths. Ren Duxing opened his eyes and there was a trace of confusion between his eyebrows. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang asked. Ren Duxing said, I did sense 2 strange auras in the canyon below, but, speaking of this. Ren Duxing frowned. But what? They looked at him in surprise. Ren Duxing said, It seems that something is blocking my search and I can't sense their location. This, Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other. Wolf King suddenly said, Is it because of Dong Qing's sword? It's possible. That sword can even cut through the iron chain bridge. It's definitely not an ordinary sword. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. This was even more troublesome. He had been to the canyon below with Lu Xingqian before, so he knew how big it was. If he couldn't pinpoint Dong Qing's current location, then finding them would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, then looked at Ren Duxing and said, Uncle Ren, take us to the canyon. No. Ren Duxing shook his head. Why? Qin Feiyang frowned. Ren Duxing said, Do you still remember that I told you before that the 4 great sacred beasts are sealed below? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, I was the one who released the sacred monkey. What I want to talk about is the sacred monkey. In the past, when it was first released, it was only a battle saint, but now it's already a battle emperor. Ren Duxing said. So fast. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Not fast at all. That's because it was originally a demigod vicious beast. It was only because it had sealed itself all these years that its cultivation fell to battle saint. And for an existence like it that sealed itself, when it breaks out, it doesn't need to start from scratch. As long as it absorbs enough essence, its cultivation will advance by leaps and bounds. Ren Duxing said. A demigod beast. Qin Feiyang and the others were dumbfounded. This was too shocking. Ren Duxing said, The 4 great sacred beasts of the Grand Canyon used to be Mu Tianyang's 4 great sacred beasts. Each of them has unparalleled combat strength, and they're not something you can deal with now. Qin Feiyang asked, What about the other 3 great sacred beasts? Ren Duxing said, The other 3 great sacred beasts are the sacred python, sacred eagle, and sacred lion. They're still sealed. Qin Feiyang said, In other words, they're only battle saints now. Yes. Ren Duxing nodded. Qin Feiyang said, Then let's do it this way. Before they wake up, let's get rid of them first. That's what I think too. There's also that sacred monkey. If we don't think of a way to get rid of it now, we'll have no chance when its cultivation gets stronger. Wolf King said. Ren Duxing was stunned and said in surprise, Are you confident in getting rid of the sacred monkey? Qin Feiyang asked, What's the sacred monkey's cultivation level now? Ren Duxing shook his head and said, I'm not sure. In short, it's very strong. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, and sneered. Although it's no longer the sacred monkey of the past, I'm no longer the Qin Feiyang of the past. As long as its cultivation hasn't recovered to its peak state, I'm confident in getting rid of it. That's good. These 4 great sacred beasts have always been a big problem for me. In the past, I've thought of getting rid of them while they're sealing themselves, but those 4 great sacred beast emperors are protecting them at all times with countless fierce beasts. Although my strength is getting stronger day by day, they're also getting stronger. I can't find a chance at all. In the end, it's still because my cultivation is too weak and too incompetent. If it weren't for the fact that I've obtained Mu Tianyang's inheritance, I'm afraid I would have died in their hands. Ren Duxing sighed. Qin Feiyang secretly let out a long sigh. Frankly speaking, Ren Duxing suffered more than anyone else in the world, But he was also more noble than anyone else. In order to protect the thousands of creatures in the spiritual state, he had been guarding this place. He couldn't even visit his biological daughter and father. Who could compare to this kind of responsibility and breadth of mind? The Wolf King asked. After we eliminate the 4 great sacred beasts, will you be able to leave the ruins? Yes. After eliminating them, I can destroy the source of power and leave this place. But not only do we have to eliminate the 4 great sacred beasts, but we also have to kill the 4 great sacred beasts guarding them, and the other fierce beasts in the Grand Canyon. Run Duxing said. Qin Feiyang nodded. He had experienced the 4 great sacred beast emperors and other fierce beasts before, and they were ferocious by nature. If they were allowed to escape, the spiritual state would definitely be plunged into misery and suffering. No, not only the spiritual state, but the 18 counties in the 9 states would probably face a life and death catastrophe. This is no small matter. Are you really confident? Run Duxing asked again. Qin Feiyang nodded heavily. Run Duxing gritted his teeth and said, Okay, I'll take you to the Grand Canyon now, but don't alert the sacred monkey first. Let's get rid of the sacred eagle and the others without anyone knowing. No problem. Qin Feiyang smiled and turned to Wolf King and Viper saying, You guys go to the castle first and be prepared for battle at any time. Understood. The 2 men and 1 wolf nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the 2 men and 1 wolf to the castle. Then he looked at Run Duxing and said, We can move now. Run Duxing took a deep breath, and a cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, Let's go to the sacred lion's nest first. With a wave of his sleeve, he swept up Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei and rushed towards the Grand Canyon. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang said, Uncle Run, there's a question that I can't figure out. Since the sacred monkey has already broken out of the seal, why didn't it help the other 3 sacred beasts break out of the seal? Run Duxing shook his head. I'm not sure either, maybe it's not the right time. At this time, Yan Wei said again, I also have a question in my heart. Please speak. Run Duxing said. Yan Wei said, What exactly is the source of power that you're talking about? It's very complicated. I'll explain it to you simply. The storm in the canyon, as well as the gravity, all come from the source of power. In other words, the source of power is equivalent to a control mechanism. Run Duxing laughed. Yan Wei said, So you're saying that if you control the source of power, you can control those storms and gravity? Yes. Run Duxing nodded. That's strange. Yan Wei frowned. What's strange? Run Duxing did not understand. Qin Feiyang also looked at him suspiciously. Since you can control those storms and gravity, why don't you just use those storms and gravity to kill them? Even I am afraid of the destructive power of the storm and gravity. It should be very easy to get rid of them. Yan Wei said. Qin Feiyang was startled for a moment, then suddenly said, That's right, Uncle Run, why don't you do that? If I could do that, I would have done it a long time ago. Run Duxing laughed bitterly. What's the reason? Qin Feiyang and Run Duxing did not understand. Run Duxing said, Cultivation. Cultivation? Qin Feiyang and Run Duxing looked at Run Duxing suspiciously. If they didn't look, they wouldn't know. However, what scared them wasn't how high Run Duxing's cultivation was. On the contrary, Run Duxing's cultivation was lower than they had imagined. He was only a mere 5-star war master. Run Duxing laughed. Feiyang, are you very disappointed? Qin Feiyang laughed bitterly. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't disappointed. He remembered that when he saw Run Duxing in the past, the impression that Run Duxing gave him was that other than being great, he was also unfathomable. But he didn't expect him to be so weak. Run Duxing shook his head and laughed. It's not that I'm too weak, it's that you've grown too quickly. If you were still the war emperor, I would still be unfathomable in front of you. Qin Feiyang laughed bitterly. This was the truth. Let's get back to the main topic. Although I have control of the source of power, due to my cultivation, I am unable to truly control the gravity and storm. I can only travel through the gravity and storm at will. Run Duxing said. So it's like that. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. But then he suddenly frowned and said, "That's not right. When my sister and I left the ruins, you seem to have controlled the storm to intercept us." "Yes. But that wasn't actually control. I used my battle chi to push those storms in front of you." Ren Duxing laughed. "So that's how it is." Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. Yan Wei said, "Since this source of power is so terrifying, can we not destroy it?" "That's right. If we can take it away, it will definitely become a great killing weapon." Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. "You're too greedy. There are some things that we can't get just because we want them. Furthermore, I'm not interested in anything else right now. I just want to leave this place and reunite with Shuang, and the old man." Ren Duxing said. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists and said in a low voice, "Believe me, I will, and it won't be long." "Of course I believe you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought you down." Ren Duxing laughed. During the conversation, the three of them had arrived at the top of the canyon. Without a moment's delay, Ren Duxing took Qin Feiyang and the other two and turned into a stream of light, directly entering the storm in the canyon. The storm full of destructive aura whistled around them, but it didn't cause them any harm. How magical. Yan Wei's eyes lit up. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."